Chapter 810. Long Fei Ye's late letter only contained one sentence. Han Yunxi, do you still trust me? Her fingers gently brushed the ink. The ink was no longer warm, but it still emitted a faint ink fragrance. In fact, she rarely saw his handwriting, but she remembered it very clearly. This handwriting was vigorous and powerful, domineering and unrestrained, revealing his aura. It was said that the handwriting reflected the person, but she couldn't tell how he felt when he wrote these words. The romantic pinkish-purple color coupled with his vigorous handwriting made it seem like her tenderness and his iron-bloodedness blended together. They seemed to be closely integrated into each other, yet they seemed to have formed their own worlds, mutually contradictory and unable to become one. Han Yunxi, do you still trust me? She stroked the letter again and again. Finally, as usual, she carefully folded the letter neatly, put it in an envelope, and hid it close to her clothes. Then, as usual, she wrote back to him, but this time, it wasn't Long Fei Yi, I miss you. Instead, it was an empty letter. When Long Fei Yi received Han Yunxi's letter, he was on his way to Medical City. He had already been on the road for 2 days and 2 nights, so he had to rest tonight. Otherwise, the horses and Uncle Gao wouldn't be able to take it. He leaned against the carriage as he read the letter. He was still dressed in black, exuding an irresistible sense of nobility and mystery in the night. He lowered his head slightly, his drooping brows appearing slightly cold. The curve of his face appeared even more handsome and cold in the night. He quietly read the letter, forming a world of his own, a cold and lonely world. It was clearly a blank piece of paper, but he stared at it for a very long time. Bailey Mingxiang, Uncle Gao, and the shadow guard Adong were resting on the side, but their gazes all fell on the letter in His Highness Duke of Qin's hand. If His Highness Duke of Qin was able to stare at it for so long, it had to be esteemed Wang Fei's letter. But wasn't His Highness Duke of Qin reading it for too long this time? They also didn't know the truth behind Gu Beiyue's death. Bailey Mingxiang's mind kept replaying the words she had heard before. She was a woman of few words, and these days, she had been even more silent. Uncle Gao gave Bailey Mingxiang a look. Bailey Mingxiang shook his head and didn't dare to go over. In the end, Uncle Gao went over by himself. Your Highness, it's getting late. Get some rest. Your health is more important. Over the past few days, His Highness had been busy dealing with secret letters from various places and had no time to rest. Once the identity of the East Qin imperial clan was announced, it would signify the beginning of His Highness Duke of Qin's conquest of the world. The Bailey army had already taken Tianning's South Shaonan prefecture. All of the aristocratic families of the South Central regions had unanimously expressed their support for His Highness Duke of Qin and their willingness to serve the East Qin imperial clan. Meanwhile, Western Zhou, Tiannin, and even some of Tianning's separatist factions all sent secret letters to express their willingness to surrender and serve the East Qin imperial clan. The situation was great. His Highness Duke of Qin was supposed to stay in the army for a long time, but he left everything behind to travel in secret. If Consort One was still alive, she'd probably be angered to death. If Tang Zijin found out about this, he'd definitely release Aunt Ru and chase after him. Long Fei Yi recovered his wits and put away the empty letter by his chest. Coldly, he asked, "You're still not going to rest?" Uncle Gao was overwhelmed by the favor and didn't know how to reply. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi continued, "If you're not going to rest, then we'll continue on our way. We'll reach Medical City in 3 days. Then you can go back to the Tang clan to retire." Uncle Gao wanted to cry, but no tears came out. It would take at least 4 days to reach Medical City from here. If they had to get there in 3 days, they'd probably have to stay up all night again. His Highness Duke of Qin was clearly in a bad mood, so how could he dare complain? He called for Bailey Mingxiang and the others before continuing on their way. Bailey Mingxiang was still sitting by Uncle Gao's side. Not only did she recall the words His Highness Duke of Qin had said to the Shadow Guard, but she also recalled the phoenix birthmark on esteemed Wang Fei's back. She was already certain that esteemed Wang Fei still didn't know that she was the orphan of the Western Qin imperial family. Could it be that Gu Beiyue had discovered esteemed Wang Fei's and His Highness Duke of Qin's origins? So he had a conflict with them and was killed? Could it be that Gu Beiwei didn't know about esteemed Wang Fei's origins, nor did he know about His Highness Duke of Qin's? Could it be that His Highness Duke of Qin used Gu Beiwei to seize Medical City before making the first move? Or could it be that Gu Beiwei didn't know esteemed Wang Fei's origins and discovered that His Highness Duke of Qin was from East Qin? So Gu Beiwei wanted to avenge the Western Qin imperial family and got into a conflict with His Highness Duke of Qin. So he was killed? Then what about His Highness Duke of Qin? Did he know the significance of the phoenix birthmark? Did he know esteemed Wang Fei's origins? Did he really dote on esteemed Wang Fei? Bailey Mingxiang considered all the possibilities. In any case, the Shadow Clan and East Qin were irreconcilable enemies. There was no way to resolve their grudges. His Highness Duke of Qin's motive for killing Gu Beiwei was all too obvious. Bailey Mingxiang began to miss esteemed Wang Fei. She didn't know if that woman could still be as calm and collected as she used to be, dealing with difficult situations beautifully. Esteemed Wang Fei, did she understand the feud between East and Western Qin? The carriage sped along. Long Fei Yi didn't reply to Han Yunqi's letters. As usual, he stayed up all night to deal with all sorts of letters, but he never spaced out when dealing with urgent matters. Today, however, his mind had wandered off multiple times. Bailey Mingxiang was a very conflicted woman. After an entire day and night of struggling, a piece of news exploded across Cloud Realm continent like a clap of thunder. Everyone gaped at the news, their hearts thumping in fear. This news was about Han Yunqi's origins. Someone had announced Han Yunqi's identity. Qin Wang Fei, Han Yunqi, wasn't Han Kongan's daughter, but the daughter of Lady Tianxin and an orphan from the poison sect. Lady Tianxin was Mu Xian of the Mu clan, whose mother was a princess of Western Qin. Han Yunqi might not count as a Western Qin princess, but she was the only person in the world with the blood of the Western Qin imperial clan. As the sole orphan of the Western Qin imperial clan, she deserved the title of princess. When the Shadow Guard hurried over to report the news, Long Fei didn't even call for the carriage to stop. Instead, he flew out of the carriage and saw half of the secret missives scattered on the ground. He seized a Dong's horse and galloped away, leaving behind only one sentence. Bailey Mingxiang, your father will be in charge of all military affairs. Bailey Mingxiang was in a daze. She never thought that the issue she was struggling with would suddenly be announced to the public. But even though it was already out in the open, she still couldn't figure out if His Highness Duke of Qin had known about it before. A Dong fell from his horse and sat paralyzed on the ground, unable to believe his ears. Uncle Gao clutched his chest, barely able to catch his breath. When he finally recovered, he couldn't stop muttering to himself, Heavens, 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 esteemed Wang Fei is actually Long Fei. He galloped like a madman. He couldn't imagine how Han Yunqi would react after hearing the news. He couldn't imagine what kind of danger she'd be in. He wanted nothing more than to rush to her right now. Even in the face of Han Yunqi's empty missives, he was still calm and rational. But at this moment, he couldn't even maintain a shred of his composure. He had hidden everything so well, going to great lengths to erase all the clues. Mute Granny, who knew everything, was already dead. Who knew? Who would announce it to the public at a time like this? Who was it? Was it him? The person who spread the news had clearly planned this beforehand. Once the news was out, it spread to every corner of Cloud Realm continent. Even secluded places like the Tang clan were the first to hear the news. Tang Zijin's temper flared. He was about to rush down the mountain when Lady Tang stopped him. Where are you going? Lady Tang's face was ashen white as well. Where am I going? Tang Zijin laughed coldly. Iru already had her suspicions when she overheard about the Shadow Clan, but I never expected Han Yunqi to really be a descendant of Western Qin. We didn't have any proof before, but now that we've been exposed, I'm going to ask Fei how he's going to deal with that woman. Lady Tang gave him a shove and said coldly, with Fei's shrewdness, how could he not know? Would he really allow a woman of dubious origins to stay by his side? Her words woke Tang Zijin up, causing him to calm down. You mean to say, Fei, he was hiding things on purpose? Lady Tang sighed. Most likely. Didn't Ali write a letter yesterday about Gu Beiwe? As I see it, Faye must have killed Gu Beiwe to silence him. Nonsense. The ancestors of Western Qin's imperial clan and our Tang clan will never allow him to do such a preposterous thing. Tang Zijin raged as he turned to head for the back of the mountain. Where are you going now? Lady Tang chased after him. Tang Zijin didn't even look back as he sped up. To find Iru. It wasn't just Tang Zijin who was furious, but Bailey Yuanlong as well. When he learned that Han Yunxi was a descendant of Western Qin's imperial clan, he couldn't contain his rage. He immediately wrote a letter urging His Highness Duke of Qin to kill her as soon as possible. First, it would prevent future troubles, and second, it would appease the East Qin soldiers. How many innocent Bai clan members had been sacrificed in the war between Eastern and Western Qin? How many families had been destroyed and homeless? How many had hidden their identities and never seen the light of day? All of this had been caused by Western Qin's imperial clan. When the old man from Kenzo heard the news, his first reaction was, Han Yunxi is a descendant of Western Qin. This Faye was actually tricked by a woman. Before the first wave had even subsided, another wave rose as all of Cloud Realm continent boiled over. Some said that His Highness Duke of Qin had been tricked by Han Yunxi, while others claimed that he'd long known of Han Yunxi's identity and used it to hurt her on purpose. Still others claimed that they didn't know each other's identities at all. Now that they knew, they'd definitely turn into enemies still. No one bothered to find out who spread the news. In the medical academy, Han Yunxi sat up and down in her rooms, feeling unwell all over. She suddenly thought of Mute Granny, that Mute Granny of the Mu clan. Ever since she found out about her origins in the poison sect, she'd never suspected that she was a descendant of Western Qin's imperial clan. How could she have known that Lady Tianxin was not only a daughter of the Mu clan, but a descendant of Western Qin's imperial clan as well? Even after Gu Beiwe's identity as a member of the Shadow Clan was exposed, she didn't suspect anything. When Chu Shifeng told her that Gu Beiwe was the only remaining member of the Shadow Clan, and that Gu Beiwe only wanted to live a peaceful life, she believed him. Back then, she even thought that if she was a descendant of Western Qin's imperial clan, then Gu Beiwe had no reason to hide it from her. Thus, she believed Chu Shifeng's words. But now, what about Long Fei Yi? How much did he know about Long Fei Yi? Han Yunxi pressed her hands against the table as she panted for breath. She did her best to think back to everything she knew about Mute Granny. She recalled how Mu Ling had cursed and berated her when she'd blocked her carriage. Mu Ling had accused her and Long Fei Yi of killing Mute Granny. Han Yunxi took multiple deep breaths but couldn't calm down. She couldn't think of anything. Ling, she had to find Mu Ling, but as soon as she opened the door, she saw Chu Shifeng, Su Donglin, and a group of shadow guard blocking her way. She ignored them, but Su Donglin stopped her. Esteemed Wang Fei, you can't go anywhere. Who gave you the right to restrict me? Han Yunxi demanded. Long Fei Yi? But Chu Shifeng's tone was cold. No. Chu Shifeng, what does he mean? Chu Shifeng's ancestors had almost been exterminated by the Western Qin imperial clan during the war between Eastern and Western Qin. Chapter 811. Han Yunxi was such a sharp person. Cold as she scrutinized Chu Shifeng, she could smell the scent of hatred. It was precisely this taste of hatred that was like a basin of cold water pouring down from the top of her head, drenching her thoroughly. It also made her completely calm down from her chaotic thoughts. Long Fei Yi was the East Qin crown prince, while she was the orphan of Western Qin. Eastern and Western Qin had a reconcilable enmity between them. Actually, she wasn't the real Han Yunxi, so she couldn't sense any hatred. But Long Fei Yi was different. Long Fei Yi had known since he was a child that he wasn't the real Tianning imperial prince. Moreover, his imperial mother had long been cultivating Beauty's blood in hopes of breaking through the perplexing butterfly illusion and taking over the world. All of this proved that Long Fei Yi had been shouldering the heavy responsibility of avenging his country since he was a child. All of his years of hard work had been for the sake of hoisting the East Qin banner and conquering the world one day. Most of his most loyal subordinates, who knew his background like the back of their hands, were most likely loyal to the East Qin imperial family. Whether it was the Bailey army, the Shadow Guard, or the Tang clan. It'd be strange if Chu Shifeng didn't hate her. Although Han Yunshi couldn't sense West Qin's hatred towards East Qin, she could understand the feelings of national enmity and family hatred. She too cherished her motherland and hated all those invaders, plunderers, and murderers throughout history. Seeing the enmity in Chu Shifeng's eyes, Han Yunshi's head was filled with thoughts. All she cared about was the truth. Did Long Fei know about her identity long ago? That was why she was in such a rush to find Mu Ling. Long Fei had been investigating her identity all this time. He'd found out about Lady Mu Xin from the Mu clan in Medicine City. Today's news from Dragon Sky Continent had mentioned the Mu clan's Mu Xin and confirmed that she was a descendant of Western Qin's imperial clan. This coincidence, combined with Mu Ling's accusation of blocking the carriage, made it hard for her not to think of Mute Granny. Mute Granny was definitely the one who knew the truth the best. If Long Fei had known about her identity, he could have easily shut Mute Granny's mouth to hide it from her. If that was really the case, what was Long Fei's intention towards her? What was the purpose of Long Fei cooperating with Gu Beiwei? There was also another possibility. Mute Granny's case had nothing to do with Long Fei. Long Fei also didn't know about her past. However, this possibility also made Han Yunshi feel even more helpless and desperate. How could the East Qin crown prince fall in love with a descendant of the Western Qin royal family? Was Long Fei regretting at this moment? Regretting that he had taken the initiative to come to her? What was the truth? She hated doubts and suspicions. She only wanted the truth. Whether it was hurt, anger, hatred, resentment, or willingness to love to the end, they all needed the truth. Only after knowing the truth would they have a choice. Otherwise, she'd be led around like an idiot. She hated this feeling. This was her last chance to calm down. Long Fei. Long Fei. At least, you know who you are. But what about me? Han Yunshi thought of Gu Beiwei, the descendant of the Shadow Clan and Western Qin's most loyal supporter. Gu Beiwei, how much do you know? How much have you lied to me? Chu Shifeng, are you planning to rebel against your superiors? Han Yunshi sounded like she was questioning him, but she was actually probing him. Rebel? Western Qin spawn, you're not worthy. Chu Shifeng gave a cold snort. Not long ago, he'd been trying to explain things to her in a submissive tone, afraid that she'd misunderstand Long Fei. But now his attitude had changed 180 degrees. How much did he hate the Western Qin royal family? I want to see Long Fei. Where is he? Han Yunshi said cold. Don't worry. His Highness will definitely come to see you one last time. Chu Shifeng said cold. Long Fei. Long Fei knew about my identity long ago? He's been lying to me this entire time? Han Yunshi suppressed her anger as she probed again. Chu Shifeng hesitated, but still insisted, yes. Han Yunshi couldn't restrain her anger. She turned to enter the room and slammed the door shut. She paced back and forth in the room, unsure of how much longer she could hold out. Outside, Su Donglin asked in a low voice, Boss, how could you do this? You lied to esteemed Wang Fei. Actually, they'd been stunned when they heard the news as well. They had no idea whether His Highness Duke of Qin had known about esteemed Wang Fei's identity long ago. I didn't lie to her. His Highness must have known everything long ago. Otherwise, why would he work with Gu Beiwei? If His Highness isn't in the army, then he must be in Medical City. Chu Shifeng replied. As he saw it, His Highness was only working with Gu Beiwei to use Gu Beiwei. How could His Highness Duke of Qin ever rely on or value a member of the Shadow Clan? He was simply inviting a wolf into the house. Actually, he'd always harbored suspicions about His Highness Duke of Qin after Gu Beiwei's assassination attempt, but he never dared to voice his suspicions. Moreover, as a subordinate, he had to do his best to persuade his mistress. But things were different now. Han Yunshi's identity perfectly explained His Highness Duke of Qin's strange behavior. Now he was certain that the dark-robed assassin was His Highness. His Highness must have known about Han Yunqi's identity long ago. He must have hidden his identity to assassinate Gu Beiwei because he wanted to keep using Han Yunqi. Unfortunately, Han Yunqi happened to see him that night. Su Donglin shook his head. He didn't agree with Chu Shifeng's guesses. Boss, if that's the case, why did His Highness hide it from you? Why hasn't he shown himself yet? It was normal for His Highness Duke of Qin to hide the fact that Chu Shifeng was the head of the Shadow Guard, but he shouldn't have hidden it from Chu Shifeng. Chu Shifeng was clearly using his position to avenge a personal grudge. Chu Shifeng grew angry from embarrassment and gave a cold snort. No matter what, she's our East Qin's enemy, and His Highness's enemy. Perhaps she knew everything long ago and snuck into His Highness's side. Don't forget, she was the one who showed up at the wedding herself. Boss, don't act rashly. Let's wait for His Highness's reply before we discuss it. Su Donglin murmured. Although he was shocked by esteemed Wang Fei's identity, he still remembered how well she treated the Shadow Guard. Inside the room, Han Yunqi was staring blankly at the pinkish-purple letter. Han Yunqi, do you still believe it? She muttered to herself. Long Fei Yi, what should I believe in you? She replied to his empty letter because she wanted to imitate his previous one. She was telling him that her feelings for him were the same as his feelings for her. On the night of Gu Beiwei's assassination, Lil Thing had bitten the dark-robed assassin's shoulder. Although Lil Thing's fangs hadn't recovered yet, she'd long smeared blood at dawn on Lil Thing's fangs before coming to Medical City. She hoped it'd be an extra helper in times of danger. It would only take one night for blood at dawn to take effect. Blood at dawn was a new poison from the poison pond. It was very similar to throat sealing at dawn, a commonly used poison in the poison world. It was impossible to tell the difference without careful examination. But there was a world of difference between their antidotes. There was only one antidote for blood at dawn, and it was in her hands. On the other hand, the antidote for throat sealing at dawn was very easy to buy. If the dark-robed assassin was Long Fei Yi, he'd quickly discover that the antidote for throat sealing at dawn was ineffective. If he didn't come to her for the antidote, he'd definitely die. If the dark-robed assassin wasn't Long Fei Yi, he'd definitely come to her door to ask for the antidote. Who wasn't afraid of death? The assassin had remained silent until now. No matter how powerful an expert was, it was impossible to detoxify this new type of poison in a single night. Moreover, she'd paid attention to the dark-robed assassin's shoulder that night and hadn't noticed any signs of poisoning. Han Yunqi had long suspected who the assassin was and how he'd managed to detoxify the poison in an instant. She was also certain that the culprit had used Celestial Mountain's swordsmanship techniques to exploit Gu Beiwei's death and sow discord between her and Long Fei Yi. She hadn't said anything because she wanted to beat Long Fei Yi at his own game and lure the snake out of its hole. Secondly, she was still angry at Long Fei Yi. She couldn't accept the fact that Long Fei Yi hadn't told his wife a single thing before announcing his identity to the public. She'd been waiting for him to give her an explanation this entire time. But who knew that she'd received such terrifying news instead? She was actually a descendant of Western Qin's imperial clan. She dearly wished that the news was fake, but how could anyone else know about the phoenix birthmark on her back? Someone must have found out about her identity and confirmed that she had a birthmark on her back. She forced herself to stay calm and collected as she waited for the truth. Chu Shifeng's words had given her the answer she wanted. If her identity hadn't been exposed, would Chu Shifeng and Su Donglin have continued to help Long Fei Yi explain things and help Long Fei Yi keep up the act? Even if it wasn't Long Fei Yi who'd tried to assassinate Gu Beiwei as the East Qin Crown Prince, Long Fei Yi had deceived Gu Beiwei and her. What kind of good intentions did he have? If he wasn't using her, then what was he? She'd once stood by the window of Leisurely Cloud Pavilion and imagined countless times what kind of woman he'd treat with sincerity and tenderness like water. She'd even believed that lucky woman was herself. But in the end, it was all just a show of using her. What a fool! Was it fated that the princess of Western Qin would never be treated with sincerity by him? Han Yunqi gently lifted her sleeve and looked at the cinnabar mark on her arm. She seemed to understand something and smiled bitterly. After being married for 4 years, this cinnabar mark was probably his true feelings for her. He'd rejected her with all his heart. Her heart was about to break, but Han Yinshi didn't cry. She didn't complain, but only felt bitter and self-mocking. Even when it came to love, she was still stubborn and strong in her bones. She stuffed the pink letter under the teapot and went to open the door, only to find it locked from the outside. Chu Shifeng. Open the door. Chu Shifeng. There was clearly someone outside the door, but no one answered her no matter how hard she knocked. So be it. She'd wait. Even if she'd been deceived and used, she still had a question to ask Long Fei Yi face to face. She wanted to know everything. Even if my world is about to collapse, I'll wait until I get his answer. Then it'll collapse completely and be destroyed. Actually, the hardest thing to endure wasn't falling apart, but being rational. Sometimes falling apart was a form of release. Han Yinshi didn't cry or make a fuss. Sitting quietly in her room and waiting was the greatest torment of her life. She was just this kind of woman. Even in desperate straits, she could keep her cool. If such a woman really collapsed one day, what kind of scene would it be? Han Yinshi was waiting for Long Fei Yi, while Chu Shifeng was waiting for Long Fei Yi. Luo Zuishan was burning with anxiety as he tried to find a way to hire people, hoping to find a high-level expert to avoid the shadow guard on the cliff and enter the abyss to tell Gu and Mu Ling everything. Gu and Mu Ling were in the abyss, not daring to waste a second in their search. They had no idea how much of Cloud Realm continent had boiled over. When night fell, the sound of firecrackers rose from outside the medical academy. Very soon, beautiful fireworks bloomed in the air, making it impossible to tell who was celebrating. Chu Shifeng and Su Donglin sat by the door in silence. Both of them were very disappointed. They had no idea that the sound of the fireworks had been heard. They didn't know that someone had lifted the roof tiles and snuck into the room. Chapter 8:12. The sound of bamboo breaking continued, and the fireworks that bloomed in the night sky lit up the dark room from time to time. Han Yinshi sat at the tea table, staring at the letter in a daze. Suddenly, someone covered her mouth from behind. She was so startled that she hurriedly shot out a needle, but the person behind her seemed to know her poison techniques very well. Not only did he avoid her hidden needle, he also restrained her other hand that was about to use poison. She, who didn't know martial arts, would always be at the mercy of an expert's mercy when she encountered a surprise attack. She was in a very bad mood and was too lazy to struggle, so she simply stayed motionless. Unexpectedly, that person ruthlessly tore off her purple muslin outer garment. Han Yinshi was caught off guard. When she reacted, her outer garment had already been torn to shreds and thrown to the ground. She was so shocked that her soul almost left her body. She fiercely struggled, but that person's strength was very great. He firmly restrained her with one hand. He moved close to her ear and whispered, "Don't be afraid. I just want to confirm one thing. I won't hurt you." Even though the breath by her ear was very warm, this voice still made Han Yinshi couldn't help but shiver. "It's him, Ning Chung, the head of the D clan. Bastard, you've already hurt me." Han Yinshi roared in her heart. It was summer, so she really couldn't wear undergarments like other girls. She wore a custom-made chest wrap, a camisole, and a purple muslin outer garment. Now that her outer garment was torn, she was incomparably exposed in front of Ning Chung. If this kind of clothing was in modern times, it would be considered normal. But if Long Fei Yi found out, she couldn't imagine how angry he would be. Very quickly, Han Yunshi returned to her senses. What kind of situation was this? She actually still cared about Long Fei Ye's reaction. Would he really mind? That cold and terrifying face, that pair of monstrous angry eyes, uncontrollably appeared in her mind. At such a critical moment, she actually became absent-minded again. She really couldn't believe that his previous mind, his previous anger, was all an act. Long Fei Yi, when will you come? I have to ask you that question face to face. Han Yunshi quickly regained her senses, but Ning Chung was stunned. The news of unknown origin was so detailed that it almost exposed Han Yunshi's background. Everyone was so shocked that they forgot to question it. The various forces in the world naturally wish for the world to be in chaos, and he needed clear evidence. Chu Yunyi had once told him that any Western Qin orphan born as a girl would have a phoenix birthmark on her back. He just wanted to tear off Han Yunxi's outer clothes and lift up her inner clothes to see if she really had a phoenix birthmark. But he never thought that under Han Yunxi's outer clothes, there was actually such a camisole. By now, the calm Ning Cheng had long thrown the phoenix birthmark to the back of his mind. When he met Han Yunxi, his strong self-control seemed to vanish into thin air. This woman had taken too many of his firsts. The first time he'd been splashed with wine, the first time he'd been cursed at, the first time he'd been distracted by her needles. This time, it was his first time as well. This was the first time he'd seen a woman wearing so little. This was the first time he'd held a woman so tightly in his arms. This was the first time he couldn't stop his heart from racing. He couldn't control his eyes as they swept over Han Yunxi's graceful back and rested on the tube top peeking out from beneath the gauze. He seemed to know he shouldn't, but couldn't bear to look away. He hesitated again and again. Suddenly, Han Yunxi viciously stomped down on Ning Cheng's left foot. At the same time, a poison needle emerged from the bottom of her shoe and pierced through Ning Cheng's boot to his left foot. Ning Cheng finally recovered his senses. Just as Han Yunxi was about to stomp down on him, he used his right knee to push against Han Yunxi's knee socket. In an instant, Han Yunxi fell to her knees. Ning Cheng kept one hand over her mouth and the other bound her hands as he fell to his knees with her. Han Yunxi struggled desperately and was about to break free from Ning Cheng's grip when Ning Cheng suddenly leaned over and pressed his tall body against hers, forcing her to lie on the ground. Abominable! Han Yunxi had long cursed Ning Cheng's ancestors in her heart. She could guess what this guy wanted to do. Didn't he want to see her birthmark to confirm her identity? Weren't the D clan and the Nether clan jackals of the same lair? They wanted to use the orphan of the Western Qin imperial family to control the emperor and the nobles. Han Yunxi's entire body was on the ground. Ning Cheng, that bastard, was actually on top of her, one hand covering her mouth and the other pressing down on her hands that were tied behind her back. This position wasn't flirtatious at all. It was simply unbearable to look at. Ning Cheng, either you kill me, or I, Han Yunxi, will definitely repay you 100-fold for what you did to me today. Han Yunxi secretly swore in her heart. Han Yunxi stopped struggling and waited. Ning Cheng's hands were busy, so he couldn't tear off her clothes and look at her birthmark. She was going to wait for the poison in his foot to erupt. Let's see who would beg who then. The poison was called E. Once poisoned, one would feel as if they were being burned by a raging fire for a short period of time. Not only would they feel a burning sensation, but their skin would also blister and ulcerate, as if they were being burned by real fire. If he didn't detoxify it in time, Ning Cheng would become a cripple. This poison could even burn his bones. After experiencing several dangerous situations, Han Yunxi's poison needles were all highly toxic. The moment the poison needle entered his foot, Ning Cheng knew that he had been poisoned. How could this poisonous woman's golden needles not be poisonous? How wonderful! He had spent so much effort searching for the golden needles, but in the end, they pierced his body in such a way. The burning sensation became more and more real, but he forcibly ignored the fact that the shadow guard outside could discover the hole in the roof at any time. He had to confirm Han Yunxi's identity as soon as possible. He whispered, Han Yunxi, I don't mean any harm. I just want to see the birthmark on your back. If you are really a descendant of the Western Qin royal family, then you are the master of the D clan. I am willing to pay the price for my offense today and let you do whatever you want with me. I will let go of you now. Don't speak. Nod your head if you agree. Han Yunxi nodded without hesitation. However, just as Ning Cheng let go, she was about to scream. Fortunately, Ning Cheng knew that he was just testing her. He didn't let go of Han Yunxi and covered her mouth in time. You didn't keep your word, Ning Cheng reprimanded. Keep my word with you? Can my word be eaten? Han Yunxi roared in her heart. Once Ning Cheng saw the birthmark on her back and confirmed her identity as a descendant of the Western Qin royal family, would Ning Cheng let her go? Wouldn't Ning Cheng take her to the battlefield hang up the Western Qin royal family's military flag, and gather the supporters of the Western Qin royal family to fight against the Long Fei Yi? Of course, she had to scream. Even if the shadow guard rushed in and saw her disheveled clothes, she couldn't let Ning Cheng have his way. Ning Cheng didn't dare to let go of Han Yunxi so easily. The pain in his foot made him dare not delay any longer. He made up his mind and whispered, "Since you don't want to cooperate, then I'm sorry to offend you." Before Han Yunxi could understand what he meant, Ning Cheng bit his sleeve and tore off a strip of cloth. His hands and mouth worked together to wrap the cloth around her hands. Finally, he freed one of her hands. Without hesitation, he lifted up the corner of her clothes. Han Yunxi didn't care about shame or chastity. She buried her head on the ground and closed her eyes. Her heart was cold. Once Ning Cheng kidnapped her, the princess of Western Qin, he could draw out the other forces of the 7 noble families. Even people like Chu Tianyin might betray the Long Fei Yi. When the Long Fei Yi went on a campaign against the Di clan, the war of revenge would evolve into a decisive battle between the orphans of the Eastern and Western Qin royal family. When the time came, she and the Long Fei Yi would be completely at odds. If she didn't die, then he would. Long Fei Yi, will I have the chance to ask that question again? After parting at Tianshan Mountain, we become old enemies when we meet again. Ning Cheng saw the birthmark. It was light red, like the wings of a phoenix. If he didn't look at it closely, he might not have noticed it. Ning Cheng was stunned at first. Then he smiled foolishly. In the dim light, he revealed a row of white teeth. His smile was especially beautiful. It's her. It's really her. Not long ago, he received the news that Han Yunxi was the descendant of the Western Qin royal family. He was stunned for a long time. He couldn't believe his ears. The woman he tried so hard to kidnap, get rid of, and avenge was actually his master, the one the Di clan had been searching for many years. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was so glad that he didn't hurt her. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to blame himself for the rest of his life. Ning Cheng's excitement was all overflowing in his smile. If his subordinates saw him now, they probably wouldn't recognize him. Did finding the princess of the Western Qin royal family make him so stupid? This wasn't like Ning Cheng at all. Was he really happy just because she was the princess of the Western Qin royal family? Han Yunxi struggled violently. Only then did Ning Cheng come back to his senses. The first thing he did was to pull up her clothes and take off his outerwear to cover her. "Princess, this subordinate has finally found you. There are many things that are hard to explain in a few words. Come back with this subordinate, and this subordinate will slowly report." Ning Cheng's voice became respectful. Han Yunxi's mouth was still covered, so she could only struggle to protest. Who knew that Ning Cheng would say, "Excuse me," and hit the back of her neck with his palm, causing her to faint. Ning Cheng's poisoned foot stomped viciously against the ground, causing him so much pain that his 3 souls and 7 spirits were about to scatter. He'd never knit his brows in the past, but this time he was furrowing his brows. Still, he stomped down again and used the momentum to fly out of the hole in the roof with Han Yunxi in his arms. The fireworks were still going on, but Chu Shifeng and Su Donglin were still lost in their own thoughts. They didn't notice anything strange about the roof. Just before daybreak, Chu Shifeng received a letter from His Highness Duke of Qin. Chu Shifeng's previous letter had been sent to the army, then sent by the shadow guard to Long Fei Yi. It took a long time, so it wasn't clear whether the Long Fei Yi had received it or not. The letter he'd just received wasn't Long Fei's reply, but something Long Fei had sent to him after Han Yunxi's identity was exposed. Chu Shifeng quickly opened the letter, only to see a single line of words. "Protect her completely, or else bear the consequences. Your lordship will be there soon." Chu Shifeng gave a start. Su Donglin scooted over and blurted out, "His Highness, he still wants to protect esteemed Wang Fei." Chu Shifeng slowly turned back to look at Su Donglin in disbelief. Su Donglin suddenly rose to his feet and opened the door. He had to explain things to esteemed Wang Fei, but when he rushed in, he saw that there was no one inside. Instead, the roof tiles had been moved aside to reveal a large hole. Boss! Boss, bad news! Su Donglin cried out in fear. Chapter 813. Chu Shifeng rushed into the room and saw that it was empty, leaving him dumbfounded. No matter whether His Highness Duke of Qin wanted to protect this woman or not, she couldn't disappear. Chu Shifeng finally realized his negligence. He brought the Shadow Guard with him, but had only arranged for the Shadow Guard to guard the doors and windows. He'd neglected the roof. Moreover, the fireworks just then hadn't aroused his suspicions. He slapped his own mouth. Damn it! Su Donglin searched around the room before he found something. Frightened, he cried out, Boss! Chu Shifeng chased after him and saw the object on the ground. He was scared out of his wits as well. It was none other than Han Yunxi's torn purple muslin robes. Boss, esteemed Wang Fei, she couldn't have she. Su Donglin was incoherent. Chu Shifeng raged. She's not esteemed Wang Fei. Hurry and find her. I'll go find Department Head Shin right now and ask him to seal the city gates. Hurry and bring people to search the area. Hurry. Boss, shouldn't we send a message to His Highness first? Su Donglin asked. Chu Shifeng was extremely irritated. I know. The two of them split up. Su Donglin was about to leave when he turned back and reminded, Boss, no matter who she is, His Highness will protect her. She's still our mistress. Impossible. Chu Shifeng raged. Boss, His Highness's letter is still in your hands. Su Donglin said, His Highness has esteemed Wang Fei in his heart. You've been with them for the longest time, so you should know better than us. His Highness is East Qin's only hope. He's going to revive East Qin and become its emperor. How could he fall for Western Qin's princess? If he wants to revive East Qin, he'll have to get revenge first and destroy the remnants of Western Qin. Han Yunxi is the first. Even if His Highness wants to protect her, he must have other motives. It's definitely not a love affair. Chu Shifeng was both angry and anxious as he roared. Why aren't you looking for her yet? Hurry! Su Donglin was scared out of his wits. He turned around and ran. Soon, Vice Academy Head Shin ordered all 4 gates of Medical City to be sealed. No matter what the reason was, no one was allowed to leave, even if they had the dean's or elder's orders. Soon, the Shadow Guard and the medical guards broke the silence of the night in Medical City. No one knew what had happened. They only knew that an important person had been kidnapped. Tang Li and Ning Jing were in an inn. The two of them had been in a cold war since then. Although they still slept on the same bed, they had slept with their backs facing each other for several nights. Banging on the door woke them up. The guards came in and searched the room, but they found nothing before leaving. Tang Li soon found out from the innkeeper that the guards were here to search for someone. Who is this important person? Is there a need to mobilize so many people? Tang Li asked. I don't know. If it's not someone from the medical school, then it's someone from some big family. The city gates are all sealed, the shopkeeper replied. Ning Jing stood at the top of the stairs, her face a little pale. She knew it was Ning Chung who had kidnapped the person. Since Ning Chung had done that, it meant he'd seen the phoenix birthmark. Han Yunxi really was the princess of Western Qin. The D clan had finally found their master, but no one expected it to be Han Yunxi. Ning Jing suddenly wanted to run over and see Ning Chung. Heaven knows what he's feeling right now. Tang Li turned around just in time to see Ning Jing. He glanced at her before heading out the door again. Ning Jing was planning to ignore him. It was good that Tang Li was going out. She could pay her respects to her master as well. But then she thought of something and chased after Tang Li. Where do you think you're going in the middle of the night? Tang Li ignored her. He wanted to leave for a long time already. When he found out about Han Yunxi's identity, the first thing he thought of was Mute Granny. When Long Fei Yi imprisoned Mute Granny in the U prison, he was the one who kept watch over her. At that time, he couldn't figure out why Long Fei Yi had secretly imprisoned an old granny. Later, Long Fei Yi talked to Mute Granny about something, and Mute Granny committed suicide. Tang Li was almost certain that Long Fei Yi had known about Han Yunxi's identity for a long time and had been deliberately hiding it. Not only did he hide it from Han Yunxi, but he also hid it from everyone. Mute Granny's suicide must have been because Long Fei Yi had said something. What Tang Li didn't understand was, other than Mute Granny and Long Fei Yi, who else in this world knew about Han Yunxi's identity? Gubeiwe? His mind was in a mess. For a moment, he couldn't accept that his sister-in-law was the princess of Western Qin. However, he couldn't bear to hate Han Yunxi. He also didn't know why he was going to the medical school. It was a good opportunity to ask who had been kidnapped. Tang Li stopped for a moment and continued to walk without saying a word. Ning Jing's anger rushed to her heart. She reached out and blocked Tang Li. You still want to look for Han Yunxi? It's so late, and you're still going to look for her. Don't you have any shame? She clearly guessed that he was going to ask about who had been kidnapped, but she deliberately pretended to be jealous. So what if I am? Is it any of your business? Tang Li retorted. I'm your wife. How is it any of my business? Ning Jing retorted angrily. She couldn't tell whether she was pretending or really angry. Wife? Tang Li laughed. Ning Jing, so you still know that you're my wife? I thought that you were unwilling to admit this after getting married. Oh, right, Tang Li, only now know that my wife is a descendant of the 7 noble families. Huh? Ning Jing looked into Tang Li's eyes and asked seriously, Tang Li, do you really think of me as your wife? Tang Li avoided her gaze. He didn't know why, but he didn't dare to look at her. He walked around Ning Jing and still wanted to leave. Ning Jing suddenly grabbed his hand. Tang Li, I was wrong. I shouldn't have hit you. I shouldn't have doubted you. I was wrong. Tang Li, Medical City won't be peaceful. Cloud Realm won't be peaceful either. Let's go back to the Tang clan and get away from all of this, okay? Ning Jing said these words in her heart. Unfortunately, Tang Li didn't want to leave. He didn't want the Cold War to end, so he said lightly, if you want to go back, I'll send someone to send you back first. With that, he walked away without looking back, leaving Ning Jing standing alone in the dark night. Only when Tang Li's figure disappeared at the end of the road did Ning Jing regain her senses. Her usually shrewd eyes were dim, and there was even a trace of sadness in them. Tang Li had already left. What else could she do? She could only hurry over to Ning Cheng's place to take a look. The entire medical city was searching for people, but Ning Cheng had a place to hide. He hid Han Yunxi in an unknown residence. By the time Han Yunxi woke up in a daze, it was already noon of the next day. She found herself lying on the bed and covered with a silk quilt. She gave a cold snort and sat up abruptly. Only then did she realize that she was still wrapped in the outer coat Ning Cheng gave her last night. The clothes underneath were also intact. Princess, you're awake. Princess, drink some water first. Breakfast is already prepared. The 2 servant girls waiting on the side hurried over to serve her. Han Yunxi flung the cup away and said angrily, Where's Ning Cheng? As soon as she said that, the sound of Ning Cheng kneeling came from behind the screen. This subordinate, Ning Cheng, the head of the D clan, greets the princess. Long live the princess. Last night, after he had brought her back, he had been guarding behind the screen all night. Han Yunxi almost didn't understand that Ning Cheng was kneeling to greet her. She hurriedly got off the bed, wrapped her clothes tightly around herself, and rushed over. She saw Ning Cheng kneeling behind the screen. He bowed deeply, his forehead still touching the floor. Recalling the events of last night, Han Yunxi's anger flared up. She said coldly and raised her head. Ning Cheng immediately raised his head. That face with thick eyebrows and big eyes was handsome and dashing. Han Yunxi sized him up seriously. Suddenly, she raised her hand and slapped him hard. After the loud slap, the whole room was silent. Ning Cheng was startled. His respectful gaze suddenly turned cold. The side of his face burned and immediately turned red. It was obvious that Han Yunxi used a lot of strength. Facing Ning Cheng's cold gaze, Han Yunxi wasn't afraid at all. She didn't just want to humiliate Ning Cheng. She simply wanted to kill him. Coldly, she stared at him and angrily scolded, "Shameless!" Only then did Ning Cheng understand that Han Yunxi hit him because of last night's incident. He lowered his eyes. Last night's incident was this subordinate's offense. "Princess, please punish me." Han Yunxi then raised her hand to slap him again. Ning Cheng didn't dodge. Han Yunxi wasn't joking with him. She really wanted to hit him, Since Ning Chung pretended to be so respectful, then she would cooperate with him to the end. She wanted to see how long he could endure it. She gathered her strength. Just as she was about to fiercely slap him, she inadvertently caught a glimpse of Ning Cheng's left foot. She remembered the poison from last night. Since last night, Ning Cheng's foot should have blisters or even ulcerated. He was still wearing shoes. Didn't he feel pain? Han Yunxi put down her hand and walked behind him. She looked at him with interest. "Princess, please punish me," Ning Cheng said again. "Take off your shoes. Let me take a look." Han Yunxi leisurely sat down at the side. Ning Cheng lowered his eyes. She couldn't tell what he was thinking. He sat down and really took off his shoes. His movements were quick and nimble. As soon as he took off his shoes, they saw that the golden needle that pierced his foot last night had disappeared. His entire foot was red and swollen, as if it had been burned by a raging fire. Several large blisters had appeared, and one area had even ulcerated. It was badly mutilated, because he had taken off his shoes too quickly. He had even scraped one of the blisters and oozed pus. The two servant girls were extremely distressed. Han Yunxi, on the other hand, was admiring it with interest. She said, "All right, your punishment is to cripple this foot. By tomorrow morning, the poison will enter your bone marrow and shatter it." A complicated look flashed past Ning Cheng's eyes. He lowered his head and didn't say anything. "Ning Cheng, what do you think of this punishment?" Han Yunxi deliberately provoked him. She had to force Ning Cheng's true colors out. How noble could the D clan's Ning clan be compared to the Nether clan's Chu clan? This subordinate has offended the princess and deserves 10,000 deaths. However, Ning Cheng trailed off before finally looking up at her. "However, can this subordinate owe you this debt first? It won't be too late to punish this subordinate after this subordinate assists the princess in wiping away the disgrace of our Western Qin and reviving our country. When the time comes, even if the princess wants this subordinate's life, this subordinate will offer it up personally." Han Yunxi laughed coldly in her heart. Once Western Qin was revived, she'd be nothing more than a puppet. Just like Tianning's young emperor and Empress Dowager Chu, they were both at the mercy of Ning Cheng, the prince regent. She leisurely drank her tea and waved a hand. "This Wang Fei doesn't accept credit. Mo's Weibo account. I'm Han Mo, welcome." Chapter 814. No credit at all? If things didn't go well, he would be crippled. Although he should be anxious, Ning Cheng's lips silently curved into a beautiful arc. He nodded. "All right, this subordinate accepts the punishment." Ning Cheng really didn't care about his unbearably burning feet. He just sat on the ground. He had been excited all night, and it was difficult for him to hide the joy in his eyes. He said, "Your Highness, this subordinate has been looking for you all this time." Back then, before he could finish speaking, Han Yunxi interrupted him. "Don't blame me for not warning you. Once this pie poison enters your bones, it won't just cripple your feet. The poison will spread from your feet to all the bones in your body." Ning Cheng was stunned at first, but then he laughed out loud. He said, "Since your Highness has the heart to remind me, you must have the heart to spare this subordinate. This subordinate may be so bold as to ask your Highness how to spare this subordinate's life?" Han Yunxi frowned and said coldly, "Ning Cheng, I'm not joking with you. Your Highness, if this subordinate dies, who will avenge you, restore your country, and conquer the world for you?" Ning Cheng laughed and then became serious. "Your Highness, if you can't credit, how about we change the punishment?" The two servant girls on the side looked on. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have dared to believe that Ning Wang could laugh so happily. It had to be known that in the past, even if there was a joyous occasion, Ning Wang would never laugh. Everyone in the D clan was very happy that the Western Qin princess had been found. But Ning Wang's temperament shouldn't have changed so much, right? What was he so happy about? "Let go of this princess. As long as you send this princess back to the medical academy, I'll immediately give you the antidote." Han Yunxi became serious. "Otherwise, there's no room for discussion. Just wait for your death." Han Yunxi's words were like a basin of ice water that extinguished all of Ning Cheng's enthusiasm and excitement. The smile that had been on his face all night instantly stiffened. Clearly, Han Yunqi's attitude was beyond his expectations. This woman really wasn't joking with him. But what did she mean? Shouldn't she be proud of being the only princess of Western Qin? Shouldn't she hate Long Feiyi? Shouldn't she be more anxious than him to take revenge and restore her country? She actually wanted to return to medical school? Could it be that she was still thinking about her love affair with the enemy of Western Qin, the Long Feiyi? It had to be known that Western Qin's princess becoming the East Qin Crown Prince's princess was a great shame for Western Qin. Ning Cheng, the poison in your foot won't wait for you. You don't have much time to consider. Han Yunqi said coldly. Han Yunqi, do you know what your identity means? Do you know how heavy the task is on your shoulders? Ning Cheng finally said angrily. I don't know, and I don't want to know. I only know that you offended me and kidnapped me. Han Yunqi didn't back down and closed in. Let me go back, or else you'll have to bear the consequences. Princess, Long Feiyi is the biggest enemy of Western Qin's royal family. You should be ashamed of being his princess. Princess didn't know this before, so please don't call yourself princess in the future. Ning Cheng angrily said word by word. As for this subordinate offending you, this subordinate will give you an explanation right now. As he said this, he suddenly raised his sword to cut off his foot. Cutting off his foot was to atone for his crime and also to save his life. Without his foot, the poison wouldn't spread and he could save his life. Han Yunqi was a bit surprised, but she didn't stop him. She didn't believe that Ning Cheng would really do it. Who would have thought that Ning Cheng would really do it? Han Yunqi's heart skipped a beat, but she still didn't stop him. What did cutting off his foot count for? She wanted to kill him last night. Unexpectedly, at this critical moment, the door was suddenly kicked open. Ning Jing, who had been eavesdropping outside the door, rushed in and kicked Ning Cheng's sharp sword to the side. Brother, are you crazy? Han Yunqi was very surprised that Ning Jing would appear here. Wasn't Tang Li and this woman always inseparable? Where was Tang Li? It's none of your business. Get out, Ning Cheng coldly rebuked. Although Ning Jing was usually dissatisfied with Ning Cheng, she absolutely recognized him as her brother when it came to major issues. Looking at Ning Cheng's festering foot, her heart ached. How could her proudest brother, the most respected patriarch of the D clan, be hurt and humiliated by a woman like this? She threw caution to the wind and didn't leave. Instead, she avoided Ning Cheng's hand and fiercely pushed Han Yunqi. Caught off guard, Han Yunqi backed up a few steps and almost fell over. Han Yunqi grew angry as well. Are you guys done acting? The Nether clan has already played the game of seizing the Son of Heaven to command his vassals, but you're still doing it. Aren't you tired of it? Revenge and reviving the country are all my own matters. I don't need you to remind me, much less force me. Ning Cheng, you want to use me as an excuse to recruit soldiers and buy horses to help your D-clan fight against the Long Feiyi? Don't even think about it. You should give up on that idea while it's still early. The sword in Ning Cheng's hand clattered to the ground. His handsome brows were furrowed tightly, like a string stretched taut to its limit that could snap at any moment. Ning Jing was furious. Han Yunqi, do you know how much my big brother suffered when he took on the D-clan's heavy responsibility at the age of 13? He took control of Cloud Realm Trade Consortium and the Ning clan troops at the same time. Do you know how many times he was trampled under the iron hooves of Northern Li's cavalry? Do you know how many of his ribs were broken before he established the Ning clan troops and took control of Tianning's northwestern troops? Do you know that my big sister Ning abandoned her childhood sweetheart and married into the palace at 15 to be trampled upon by that old Emperor Tianhui? Do you know how many people in the D clan have paid a price that they could not bear but had to bear all these years? Do you know that it's all for you, for the sake of Western Qin's imperial clan? If my D clan had selfish motives, why would we wait until now? With my big brother's power, the strength of my Ning clan troops, and Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's wealth, we could have swallowed up Tianning years ago and dominated the region. Why wait until Tianning's internal strife? Why tangle with the Chu clan for the sake of your whereabouts? Han Yunqi, how could you compare us to the Chu clan? How could you slander us like this? Ning Jing rarely cried, but now her face was streaked with tears. Han Yunshi, protecting and pledging loyalty to our D clan is our supreme mission and glory. Even if you want to be a Western Qin princess, you can't trample on it. You can't. Han Yunshi gave a start. Something seemed to have hit her in the heart and caught her off guard. And also, Han Yunshi, do you know what happened to the Shadow Clan? After 5 years of war between Eastern and Western Qin, only the Nether, D, He, Bai, Feng, and Li clans of the 7 noble families retained their strength. But only one member of the Shadow Clan remained. Do you know why? The Shadow Clan, Gu Biwei's gentle, calm face surfaced in Han Yunshi's mind again. Why? She muttered to herself. Because the Shadow Clan used their lives to protect Western Qin's imperial clan. Back then, the first to be destroyed wasn't the D clan, but the Shadow Clan. After the East Qin army attacked Western Qin's imperial palace, they slaughtered the entire palace for 3 days and 3 nights. The Shadow Clan could have escaped, but not a single one of them left. Every time the East Qin army killed a member of the Western Qin imperial clan, they had to kill the Shadow Guard who protected them first. There was only one member of the Shadow Clan left, that Shadow Guard who carried your grandmother away. He was the only one left. Han Yunshi, since you are the descendant of Western Qin's imperial clan, you have to take on the heavy responsibility you deserve. Even if you let down everyone, you can't let down the Shadow Clan. Ning Jing finished speaking, but her face was still filled with anger. Ning Chung was planning on taking Han Yunshi away first, and then slowly telling her about the past grudges. He never thought that Han Yunshi would have such an indifferent attitude. He didn't chase Ning Jing away, but looked at Han Yunshi with eyes that had recovered their usual coldness. In the silence of the room, the Ning siblings stared at Han Yunshi. Han Yunshi's face was expressionless, but her heart couldn't calm down. She wasn't the real Han Yunshi, nor did she have any feelings for Western Qin. She could understand the Western Qin imperial clan's hatred and the East Qin imperial clan's vengeance. But she couldn't feel it. After hearing Ning Jing's words, her heart couldn't help but clench. She saw not only the hatred between the two countries, but also the bitter price that both sides had paid over the years. They wanted revenge not only for the Eastern and Western Qin imperial clans, but also for the countless enemies in both camps. The destruction of countries, clans, and families. Chu Shifeng, for example, hated her and all the forces loyal to the Western Qin imperial clan. They wanted to restore their country, not just for the Eastern and Western Qin imperial clans, but for the beliefs, and hopes of both sides. This was no longer a matter between the two imperial clans. Ning Jing was right. She had no right to trample on the D clan's loyalty and honor. No one had the right to look down on another's beliefs. The Western Qin imperial clan was the D clan's belief. She wasn't a real princess, but she had this unique identity. That meant she had to take responsibility for it. She didn't have the selfish right to disappoint and despair the people who'd been bitterly searching for this identity all these years. But while she was Western Qin's princess, she was also herself. She had once hoped to join hands with the Long Fei Yi to conquer Cloud Realm continent and establish their own country. They could get rid of all the injustices and truly benefit the innocent people. But she couldn't sacrifice herself to restore the glory of a Western Qin country she had no feelings for or understood. She didn't think she was that great. Moreover, she wasn't planning to completely break off relations with the Long Fei Yi. He still owed her an explanation, and she still had questions to ask. She didn't want to be enemies on the battlefield the next time they met at Celestial Mountain. Even if the Long Fei Yi had used her, even if the Long Fei Yi saw her as an old enemy, she still had to get to the bottom of this question. In the silence of the room, Han Yunshi fell to the ground, caught between a rock and a hard place. For some reason, Gu Biwei's gentle, quiet face surfaced in her mind again. His warmth was like an April spring breeze that could soothe all her worries and unease. Gu Biwei, just how much of the truth do you know? Do you also have the heart to take revenge and restore your country? Seeing Han Yunshi's silence, Ning Jing grew anxious. Han Yunshi, she said angrily, You can't still be thinking about the Long Fei Yi, right? I don't mind telling you that the Wind Clan has already appeared in the world, and their leader is rushing to the battlefield. The Wind Clan is skilled in Chiman Duanjia and troop formations. With their help, the Long Fei Yi won't be able to take Tianning's southern regions for at least half a year. Cold laughter. Ning Jing lowered her voice. Also, the Northernly Cavalry is in the hands of the Wind Clan. After half a year, they'll recover their strength and invade the south en masse. The Long Fei Yi will lose for sure. The Wind Clan. Han Yinxi's heart grew cold. After all, the Wind Clan was the prime suspect for the assassination of Gu Beiwei. Chapter 8:15. The Feng Clan. The Northernly Cavalry. These two words woke Han Yunxi up from her desperate situation. She almost jumped out of her chair. She was so shocked that she couldn't hide her shocked expression. Ning Cheng and Ning Jing mistakenly thought that she was shocked by the news and realized that they had enough power to contend with Long Fei Yi. In fact, apart from being shocked, Han Yunxi also wanted to laugh. She wanted to look up to the sky and laugh 3 times. The Feng Clan? She didn't expect that the Feng Clan would appear at this juncture and hook up with Ning Cheng. It was really a waste of effort to find iron scraps in the middle of nowhere. The Feng Clan was familiar with astronomy and geography. They were proficient in Chiman Duanjia and had the ability to control the wind. This was what Long Fei Yi had told her. The first time she came into contact with the Imperial Wind Technique should be on Fishing Boat Island. At that time, Long Fei Yi was furious and ordered the Bailey Navy to surround Fishing Boat Island. He wanted to trap Jun Yixie on Fishing Boat Island. However, a poisonous fog suddenly appeared on Fishing Boat Island. The Bailey Navy was in chaos, and Jun Yixie was rescued by someone. She and Long Fei Yi rushed to the scene, but it was too late. Fishing Boat Island was windy all year round. It was difficult for the fog to gather, let alone last for a night. Therefore, the possibility of poisoning in the fog was almost zero. This was why they were confident in trapping Jun Yixie on the island, even though they knew that Jun Yixie was proficient in the art of poison. At that time, she was puzzled. Later, when Long Fei Yi mentioned the Imperial Wind Technique to her, she suspected that the person who rescued Jun Yixie was most likely a member of the Feng Clan. Moreover, there was a very important clue. Poisoning such a large amount of fog was difficult even for her. Thus, she and Long Fei Yi deduced that the person who saved Jun Yixie was most likely better at poison than Jun Yixie and herself. In the entire poison world, there was only one suspect. The former sect master of the 100 Poisons sect, Jun Yixie's master. Prior to this incident, Jun Yixie was targeted by Medical City because he cured Long Tianma's Gu. Medical City began investigating 100 Poisons sect, but unfortunately, they found nothing. Long Fei Yi and Elder Wang from Medicine City tried to arrange spies to infiltrate 100 Poisons sect, but they were unable to find anything. To this day, Han Yunxi still didn't know who had poisoned Long Tianma and caused Long Tianma's big belly disease to relapse. However, back then, Gu could tell at a glance that Long Fei Yi had been poisoned and deliberately had Luo Zuishan blow the matter up. She had asked Gu and learned that he had learned the art of poison Gu from Gu Yuntian's secret room. The art of poison Gu was a secret art of the poison sect. If he hadn't learned it from Gu Yuntian's books, then it was very likely that he had learned it from a direct descendant of the poison sect through word of mouth. Where had Jun Yixie learned it? It was very likely that his master had taught him. In other words, his master was very close to the poison sect. In summary, Jun Yixie's master was very likely related to both the Wind Clan and the poison sect's direct descendants. Moreover, when Han Yunxi was lost in the fog, she had poisoned herself. The mysterious poison's master she dueled with was extremely skilled and had dispelled her poison in an instant. Even if she used a new type of poison, it was still dispelled instantly. Han Yunxi couldn't figure it out at first, but later she realized that her poison hadn't been dispelled, but taken in. The second level of the poison storage space allowed one to suck in any poisons that were hostile to oneself into the space and make it their own. Anyone with a poison storage space had to be a direct descendant of the poison sect. No matter what relationship this mysterious poison's master had with Lady Lungyu from the City of Daughters, one thing was certain. They were targeting Grand Concubine Yi and Long Fei Ye's origins. Not long ago, the dark-robed assassin who tried to kill Gu Beiyue had also dispelled the poison in his shoulder in an instant. That was a poison grown from the poison pond. No matter how skilled he was, it was impossible to dispel the poison instantly. Thus, Han Yunxi was certain that the dark-robed assassin had a poison storage space and was a direct descendant of the poison sect. The dark-robed assassin had purposely used Kinzo's swordplay in front of everyone to imitate Long Fei Yi. His true goal wasn't Gu Beiyue, but to make her misunderstand Long Fei Yi and sow discord between them. Jun Yixie's master was related to the Wind Clan and the Poison Sect's direct descendants. The mysterious poison's master at Lost Illusory Lake had a poison storage space and was a direct descendant of the Poison Sect. The dark-robed assassin had a poison storage space and was a direct descendant of the Poison Sect. Given Lil Thing's personality, it wouldn't let go of anyone who dared to hurt Gu Beiyue, no matter the price. However, Lil Thing didn't attack a second time. If Han Yunxi wasn't wrong, Lil Thing was afraid of that person. Who else but a direct descendant of the Poison Sect could make Lil Thing so afraid? Based on these three things, it was highly likely that Jun Yixie's master, the mysterious poison's master, and the dark-robed assassin were the same person. He was a direct descendant of the Poison Sect, a descendant of the Wind Clan, and her family. Han Yunxi's identity as a direct descendant of the Poison Sect was already public knowledge. Why didn't the dark-robed assassin acknowledge her? Why did he still want to hurt Gu Beiyue? The Wind Clan had always been loyal to Western Qin's Imperial Clan and were allies with the Shadow Clan. However, the dark-robed assassin didn't stop after seeing Gu Beiyue use his shadow arts. Instead, he intensified his attacks until Gu Beiyue was dead. Why? There was only one reason. The Wind Clan had already betrayed Western Qin's Imperial Clan, just like the Nether Clan. He'd investigated Long Fei Ye's origins, refused to acknowledge her, betrayed Western Qin's Imperial Clan, and even colluded with the D Clan. What were his motives? Han Yunxi had calmed down over the past few days, but that wasn't all. She was also pondering a question she'd been unable to solve for a long, long time. Who was her father? Lady Tianxin was a descendant of Western Qin's Imperial Clan, which meant that her father was a direct descendant of the Poison Sect. Was Lady Tianxin's death an accident or murder? The daughters of Western Qin's Imperial Clan all had a phoenix birthmark. Her father and Lady Tianxin had been intimate, so he must have seen the phoenix birthmark on her back. If he knew the origin of the phoenix birthmark, then he would know Lady Tianxin's identity, which meant he'd know her identity. A few days ago, the person who'd announced her identity to the world hadn't just announced it, but also mentioned the phoenix birthmark. He even knew that Lady Tianxin was the Mu clan's Muexian. It was very likely that the person who knew so much was her father. Han Yunxi had come to a terrifying conclusion after mulling it over. Her father wasn't just a direct descendant of the Poison Sect, he was also a descendant of the Wind Clan. He'd investigated Long Fei Ye's origins, killed the Shadow Clan, then refused to acknowledge her. He'd even announced her identity and pretended to side with the D Clan, who were truly loyal to Western Qin's Imperial Clan. His goal couldn't be clearer. He wanted to sow discord between Long Fei Yi and her, so that she and Long Fei Yi would be at odds. At the same time, he'd deceive the D Clan. Han Yunxi could already foresee that in the near future, this father she'd never met before would step forward and put on a bitter father-daughter show with her. She was the princess of Western Qin, and her father, the head of the Wind Clan, was the rightful ruler of Western Qin's Imperial Clan. Although it was all conjecture and hypothesis, Han Yunxi trusted her own intuition. Few women were as rational as she was. She had 90% of her rationality, and the remaining 10% was her intuition. She trusted her rationality, but she was willing to trust her intuition just this once. She firmly believed that her guess wasn't wrong this time. There was a huge conspiracy behind all of this, a scheme to reap the benefits of the fisherman's quarrel. That black-robed assassin couldn't have imagined that his shoulder would be exposed. In a moment of desperation, he must have been able to distinguish between blood at dawn and sealed throat at dawn, then stored them in his poison storage space. Without the detox system's help, Han Yunshi wouldn't have been able to immediately determine that the poison in his shoulder was gone. How could the black-robed assassin know that she was a transmigrator who not only had a poison storage space, but also a detox system that could identify poisons? Han Yunshi looked at Ning Chung and Ning Jing with a complicated expression. How should she explain this to the siblings so that they would believe her? The grudges between the Western Qin and Eastern Qin imperial clans, whether it was revenge or restoration, they had to be fought openly, right? Could she temporarily put aside this national grudge and expose the Wen clan's big fox? Han Yunshi, think about it carefully. Whether you agree or not, you don't have a choice. Ning Jing said coldly. All right, I'll think about it. Han Yunshi finally compromised. She really needed time to think about how to persuade the D clan and how to beat them at their own game. When she said this, Ning Jing secretly let out a sigh of relief. She glanced at Ning Chung and timidly retreated. She knew that she had overstepped her boundaries. Even after Ning Jing left, Ning Chung was still coldly staring at Han Yunshi. Han Yunshi's mental strength was very good. Even if MT Tai collapsed in front of her, she would still be calm and collected. But right now, she was being stared at by Ning Chung. She took out the antidote from her medical bag. Here, your crime of offending, you owe it. This princess will calculate the interest. Ning Chung took it and expressionlessly turned to leave without saying a word. But when he reached the door, he turned back to look at her, his eyes still cold. Han Yunshi thought that he was going to say something, but who knew that he still didn't say anything? He looked at her deeply before turning to leave. If it wasn't for Ning Jing's true feelings, Han Yunshi wouldn't have so easily believed in the D clan's loyalty. She also wouldn't have believed in this bad guy's loyalty. One had to know that when they first met, Han Yunshi's impression of him was very bad. Ning Chung walked away step by step with his hands behind his back. No one saw that he was playing with a golden needle in his hand. It was the golden needle that Han Yunshi had pierced into his foot. The appearance of the Feng clan made Han Yunshi, who was already unable to calm down again. She could temporarily not entangle herself with the unresolvable grievances between the Eastern and Western Qin. For the time being, she didn't have to face a dilemma. She told herself that she didn't care about anything else. She had to take revenge for Gu Beiwei first and expose the Feng clan's conspiracy first. Han Yunshi thought, how would Long Fei Yi view the assassination of Gu Beiwei? Would he be able to discover the conspiracy behind the scenes? What is he doing right now? Currently, Long Fei Yi had just arrived at Medical City. He headed straight for the medical academy and rushed to Han Yunshi's room. He'd long received Su Donglin's secret missive and knew that Han Yunshi had been kidnapped. Chu Shifeng, Su Donglin, and a group of shadow guards were all kneeling by the door. Su Donglin was still clutching the purple muslin robe in his hands, not daring to approach. Chapter 816. Silence reigned in the courtyard as the shadow guard knelt on the ground. Su Donglin knelt in the crowd, while Chu Shifeng knelt in front of the group as their leader. Originally, Long Fei would have arrived by nightfall at the earliest, but he'd saved an entire day's worth of time and arrived early. His body was covered in dust, and his face was weary. Stubble had grown out of his beard, but none of this could hide his towering rage. He never showed his emotions on his face, but this time, his anger was written all over his face, and he did not hold back. He stared fixedly at the closed doors in silence. His heart was in a state of panic, but he still held on to a sliver of hope. He hoped that the person had already been found and was waiting for him in the room. After parting ways at Celestial Mountain, he'd spent day and night hoping to see her again and hug her tightly. Nobody knew how unaccustomed he was to days without her by his side. He'd already abandoned her once, so he was afraid. Moreover, she was in great danger this time. Now that her identity had been exposed, how many people in the East Qin camp wanted her life? How many people in the Western Qin camp wanted to use her as a puppet? Even now, he was unable to determine which side had kidnapped her. Chu Shifeng, You better have found her already. Long Fei finally spoke up, his voice as cold as the icy waters of a snowy mountain, piercing straight into one's heart and bones. Chu Shifeng's heart was filled with resentment and indignation, but all his anger was extinguished by fear and reverence as soon as he saw his master. Even his heart was trembling. To reply, Your Highness, this subordinate still hasn't found esteemed Wang Fei. With his last hopes dashed, Long Fei Ye's dark eyes were filled with rage. He walked step by step towards Chu Shifeng until he was right in front of him. Long Fei Ye's shoes almost touched Chu Shifeng's fingers, but he subconsciously withdrew his hand. Even he didn't know what he was afraid of. You were the one who told her that your lordship long knew of her identity? Long Fei Ye's voice was very calm, devoid of any emotion. Chu Shifeng understood his master all too well. The calmer he was, the angrier he was. He had read Su Donglin's letter to His Highness Duke of Qin. Su Donglin had clearly explained the entire situation and accused him of acting on his own initiative, going against his superiors, and placing esteemed Wang Fei under house arrest. Yes, he admitted honestly. Just as he was about to raise his head, the Duke of Qin suddenly kicked him hard on the chin, sending him flying backward. With a bang, Chu Shifeng's body slammed open the door, and he was flung inside. All the shadow guards were even more terrified and lowered their heads even more. Even Su Donglin hid the purple muslin robe and didn't dare to make a sound. Su Donglin had mentioned everything in his letter, except for this purple robe. No one dared to look back, but stepped aside to make a path. Long Fei walked step by step into the room before stopping in front of Chu Shifeng again. Chu Shifeng was sprawled on the ground, blood dripping from his mouth. Still, he climbed to his feet and respectfully knelt in front of Long Fei. But he'd hardly knelt when Long Fei kicked him in the chin again, sending him flying. Who told you that your lordship knew of her identity long ago? Chu Shifeng crashed into the tea table behind him and landed heavily on the ground amidst the broken tea set. Fresh blood poured from his mouth without end. Long Fei Ye's icy eyes were frighteningly cold. He didn't say a word, making him seem like the most emotionless and cruel deity in the world. He stared coldly at the heavily injured Chu Shifeng, who grit his teeth and tried to crawl to his feet again. But this time, Long Fei didn't give him a chance. He simply grabbed Chu Shifeng by the throat and lifted him into the air. He glared angrily at Chu Shifeng's eyes, but Chu Shifeng only hung his head, afraid to meet his gaze. Long Fei finally spoke up. Answer your lordship. He was about to tighten his grip when Su Donglin and the rest of the shadow guard rushed in to plead for leniency. Master, please show mercy and give Commander Chu a chance to atone for his crimes with meritorious service. With just a single request, everyone began to kowtow loudly with their heads banging against the ground. But Long Fei turned a deaf ear to their pleas and didn't stop. He had painstakingly concealed the truth for so long, even going as far as to lie to Han Yunxi. But Chu Shifeng had ruined everything with a single sentence of his own accord. He couldn't imagine how Han Yunxi had listened to Chu Shifeng's words after Gu Beiwei met with misfortune. It'd be strange if she didn't suspect him of using her. He could bear the hatred of everyone in the world, but he could not bear her hatred. Seeing that Chu Shifeng was about to be strangled to death, Su Donglin couldn't help but rush over and grab his master's hand. Your Highness, esteemed Wang Fei's gone missing. We're all in the wrong. If you want to kill Commander Chu, why don't you kill us as well? Long Fei suddenly laughed out loud. Are you threatening your lordship? This subordinate doesn't dare. Su Donglin was frightened to death. Fine. Wait until your lordship kills him. Then I'll take care of you all. Long Fei said coldly. Hearing this, Chu Shifeng couldn't help but raise his head to meet Long Fei Ye's icy gaze. Long Fei tossed him aside and demanded, What? Now you know you're going to admit your wrongs. He'd been here for so long and kicked Chu Shifeng so many times, but the man hadn't admitted a single wrong or begged for mercy. This was simply adding oil to the fire, seeking death. Your Highness, if you want to kill me or scrape me, do as you please. This subordinate has no complaints. Please don't make things difficult for the other brothers. They're innocent, Chu Shifeng said stubbornly. You won't admit your wrongs even if you die? Long Fei Yi demanded. This subordinate didn't handle matters well and didn't keep an eye on the remnants of Western Qin. This subordinate deserves 10,000 deaths for his crimes, Chu Shifeng admitted in a low voice. Long Fei was so angry that he unsheathed his sword. Finally, Chu Shifeng raised his head and declared, That woman is my East Qin's enemy. She's not my master, much less your Wang Fei. His Highness wanted him to admit his wrongs for defying his superiors and placing the Wang Fei under house arrest. He refused to admit it, even if he died. Very good, Chu Shifeng. Who told you that Han Yunxi was definitely a descendant of Western Qin's imperial clan? We didn't even find out where the rumors came from. So why do you believe them? Long Fei Yi asked. Chu Shifeng gaped. He'd been blinded by hatred and confused by Gu Beiyue's death. Why didn't he consider the truth of the rumors? Since when did you have the right to make decisions for your lordship? Depose the imperial concubine for your lordship? And since when did you find out that your lordship had long known about Han Yunxi's origins? Where did you get the guts to act on your own? Long Fei Yi was furious. Chu Shifeng, why don't you be the Duke of Qin? Chu Shifeng gave a start before realizing where he'd gone wrong. No matter what happened, he really had no right to act on his own. This was a taboo for subordinates, and a taboo for the Shadow Guard as well. The Shadow Guard had very clear rules. Anyone who disobeyed orders and acted on their own was to be killed without mercy. Your Highness, this subordinate. Chu Shifeng's attitude finally softened. Unfortunately, Long Fei Ye's eyes only grew colder. He closed his sword and used the scabbard to stab Chu Shifeng's dantian. His speed and strength were both swift and ruthless, leaving Chu Shifeng no chance to beg for mercy. Chu Shifeng's martial arts, which he'd cultivated over the past decade, were all ruined. Chu Shifeng spat out a mouthful of blood as he stared blankly at the master he'd served since childhood. Even now, he couldn't tell whether his master had destroyed his martial arts to save his life or to make him suffer a fate worse than death. Without his martial arts, he'd never be able to return to the Shadow Guard's ranks in this lifetime. Chu Shifeng wanted to see clearly and asked for clarification, but his vision quickly grew blurry and dim. In the end, he couldn't take the heavy injuries and fainted. Long Fei Yi didn't spare him a glance. Cold, he said, Someone come, send him back to Celestial Mountain. Pass down orders. No matter if it's the Shadow Guard, the army, or the Tang clan, anyone who acts on their own and disobeys in public will be killed without mercy. Everyone grew taut. Su Donglin silently rejoiced. According to the Shadow Guard's rules, Chu Shifeng would have died without a doubt. Although His Highness had destroyed Chu Shifeng's martial arts, at least he hadn't killed him. Instead, he'd sent him back to his training grounds. From today onwards, Su Donglin will assume the position of commander of the Shadow Guard, Long Fei Yi said. Su Donglin gave a start. Seeing his master's questioning gaze, he quickly stepped forward to express his thanks. Su Donglin, your lordship will give you 3 days to find the kidnappers. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences. Also, send orders to the Tang clan to find out who spread the rumors and slandered Wang Fei. Long Fei Yi added, did this count as his last shred of calm and reason? Actually, this was forced out of him. He knew that he'd lost his mind the moment Han Yunxi disappeared. He'd rushed here like a madman, so he had no choice but to calm down. If he didn't, Han Yunxi would be in even more danger. His situation wouldn't be any better either. Chu Shifeng's hatred was already so deep, to say nothing of the Bailey army and Tang clan. Of course, he understood Chu Shifeng's hatred for Western Qin. He also knew that countless of his subordinates held an irreconcilable grudge against the Western Qin imperial clan. He'd not only hidden the truth from Han Yunxi, but everyone by his side as well, including Tang Li. Since there was no way to reconcile or forgive each other, it was better to never know. He'd long arranged everything, but never expected someone to know Han Yunxi's origins so thoroughly. They even knew about the Phoenix birthmark he didn't know about, and had even announced it to the public. Just who was this person? And who was the dark-robed assassin who tried to assassinate Gu Baiwei? Actually, he really did want to use Gu Baiwei, so he concealed his identity as a member of the East Qin Imperial clan. But there was no way he'd try to assassinate Gu Baiwei. They'd long reached a consensus on Han Yunxi's origins. When he used the Lustbite energy on Celestial Mountain, he realized that Gu Baiwei had eyes and ears on the mountain as well. Moreover, Gu Baiwei knew that the Lustbite energy was the East Qin Imperial clan's most precious treasure. Gu Baiwei had threatened him that if he didn't release Han Yunxi, he would use the power of Medical City to destroy the South Central Military Governor's Manor. At that time, he realized that Gu Baiwei knew about Han Yunxi's origins. He confessed that he'd known about Han Yunxi's origins for a long time and asked Gu Baiwei why he'd hidden it even though he knew about Han Yunxi's origins. What were his intentions? Gu Baiwei didn't answer his question, but rather angrily accused him of using a woman's feelings, saying it wasn't the conduct of a man. He explained everything, but found that Gu Baiwei was the same as him. They both hoped that Han Yunxi would never know about the hatred and responsibility she carried and would always be herself. How could he, the East Qin Crown Prince, believe in the words of a descendant of the Shadow Clan? How could it be easy for a descendant of the Shadow Clan to reach a consensus with the East Qin Crown Prince? But as men who loved Han Yunxi, they understood each other's difficulties. Because they understood, they firmly believed. Why aren't you going to find her? Long Fei Yi asked. Su Donglin didn't dare leave. He took several deep breaths before taking out the purple muslin robe hidden on his belt. Your Highness. Chapter 817. That's right. Su Donglin had ulterior motives. He was the one who insisted on writing a letter to His Highness Duke of Qin to tell him everything. As a subordinate, it was his duty. But Boss Chu had taken care of him since he was a child, so he couldn't bear to see him die in His Highness Duke of Qin's rage. Boss Chu was burdened with the hatred of his ancestors, so it was understandable that he'd made such a mistake. If His Highness Duke of Qin found out that esteemed Wang Fei had not only been kidnapped, but bullied as well, then Boss Chu would probably die a horrible death. Thus, he waited until Boss Chu was sent away before he took out the purple muslin robes with trembling hands. Your Highness, this is... Before he could finish, Long Fei Yi snatched the robes away. Han Yunxi had plenty of clothes, but only a few she often wore. Long Fei Yi recognized all of them, especially his favorite purple robes, only to see that the purple muslin coat had been torn to shreds and was no longer a garment. It was impossible to imagine how they'd been torn apart. Did they tear them apart after they were taken off? Or after they were put on? Even more unimaginable was what the original owner of the robes had gone through. Long Fei's weary face instantly paled without a trace of blood. His hands were clearly trembling, as were his lips. What's going on? Su Donglin gave a start and didn't reply. He'd followed His Highness Duke of Qin for so long, but he'd never seen him like this. He assumed that His Highness Duke of Qin would be furious and kick him like Boss Chu, or even punish all of the Shadow Guard. But he never expected His Highness Duke of Qin to be afraid. Even if Cloud Realm continent fell into chaos, the skies collapsed, or the earth caved in, His Highness Duke of Qin wouldn't be afraid. However, at that very moment, his entire body was trembling. Even breathing seemed to be difficult for him as his breathing grew heavier and heavier. Just what's going on? Long Fei Yi roared. Su Donglin was so frightened that he almost jumped up. Your Highness, esteemed Wang Fei. Shishi. Su Donglin was so frightened that he couldn't speak properly. What's going on? Speak. Long Fei Yi's angry roar resounded throughout the entire courtyard. If it wasn't for the fact that this courtyard had been restricted from entering, it was likely that it would have attracted a crowd of onlookers. For the sake of the unity of the East Qin faction and her safety, he could suppress his rage and force himself to face Chu Shifeng calmly. She'd handled the matter of Chu Shifeng beautifully. First, she'd misled the public so that the Tang clan and Bailey army wouldn't dare to make a move against Han Yunxi. Secondly, He'd use the excuse of investigating the person who'd spread the rumors to make the world question their authenticity. At the same time, he let Han Yinshi know that he hadn't known about her identity long ago like Chu Shifeng had claimed. Although it was a lie, at least Han Yinshi wouldn't hate him at this critical juncture and misunderstand him. Third, he understood Chu Shifeng's hatred for Western Qin, which was the same as his own. Thus, he'd only crippled Chu Shifeng's martial arts and sent him back to Celestial Mountain instead of killing him. Not only did this serve as a warning to the restless East Qin factions, but it also prevented his subordinates from cursing him for being merciless. He'd already done his best to maintain his calm, but right now, his last bit of reason and composure had been completely shattered by the sight of the violet robe. Yes, if he'd seen the robe just then, Chu Shifeng would have died in his rage. The skies hadn't collapsed, the earth hadn't caved in, and Cloud Realm Continent was perfectly fine. But his own world had collapsed. Han Yinshi, just what's wrong with you? Just what have you experienced? Where are you? Han Yinshi, are you afraid? Han Yinshi, do you know that your lordship will be afraid? Su Donglin finally realized that His Highness Duke of Qin had lost control and regretted bringing out the robe. If His Highness Duke of Qin lost control, who would control the situation? Your Highness, esteemed Wang Fei, is perfectly fine. Su Donglin shut his eyes and shouted. Your Highness, calm down, calm down. Esteemed Wang Fei is perfectly fine with you. At least that was enough to set his mind at ease. When he didn't hear His Highness Duke of Qin's voice for a long time, Su Donglin cautiously opened his eyes. But when he saw His Highness Duke of Qin's bloodshot and stubborn eyes, his heart skipped a beat. It hurt so much. Was this still His Highness Duke of Qin? He was desperately waiting for a glimmer of hope, a faint hope. Su Donglin had followed His Highness Duke of Qin since he was a child. In his eyes, His Highness Duke of Qin was always high and mighty, always devising strategies and never panicking in the face of danger. He'd never thought that this godlike man could have such a weak side. Su Donglin wished he could come up with a reason to save His Highness, but when he opened his mouth, he realized that he didn't know how to explain himself or how to persuade him. Even he didn't believe esteemed Wang Fei would be fine. So how was he supposed to convince His Highness Duke of Qin, when a woman was kidnapped and her clothes were torn to shreds? To say nothing of anything else, her kidnapper couldn't possibly be a good person. Her clothes were already torn off, so how could they stop here and not continue? Even if they didn't continue and kidnapped her, wouldn't that be actually His Highness Duke of Qin should have thought of this as well? His Highness shouldn't have been deceived by his comforting words. Seeing His Highness Duke of Qin like this made Su Donglin even more afraid. He was at a loss for what to do and almost burst into tears. At this moment, a figure suddenly flew down and rushed in front of Long Fei Yi. Big brother, you're finally here. It was Tang Li. He'd been here several times and knew everything that had happened, but he didn't have the right to make a decision for Long Fei Yi. This wasn't a small matter, but an enormous one. If Long Fei Yi didn't handle it properly, the East Qin camp would fall into disarray. Not to mention others, just as family's elders would have traveled day and night to interrogate Long Fei Yi. Big brother, I'm going crazy with worry. What's going on here? Tang Li was very agitated, but Long Fei Yi didn't even look at him. He stubbornly stared at Su Donglin and waited for Su Donglin. His deep eyes had coldness, viciousness, and anticipation. Su Donglin finally broke down. Your Highness, this subordinate doesn't know what's going on either. Esteemed Wang Fei is blessed by the heavens and will definitely be fine. Long Fei Ye's eyes turned icy. Tang Li finally noticed that he was clutching Han Yunshi's violet muslin robes tightly in his hands. Tang Li immediately understood what was going on. Could it be that Han Yunshi isn't a descendant of Western Qin's imperial clan after all? Could it be that all the rumors in Cloud Realm Continent were just rumors? That's why Long Fei Yi was so anxious. If Han Yunshi was a descendant of Western Qin, then how could Long Fei Yi not hate her? But when he thought of Mute Granny and Gu Beiyue, Tang Li wavered again. Long Fei Yi might have long known about Han Yunxi's origins and kept it a secret from everyone, including his own little brother. Tang Li hadn't paid much attention to Ning Jing over the past few days either. Because of this, he was almost tangled up in his own thoughts. Su Donglin fell to the ground, too afraid to move. Long Fei Yi didn't make things difficult for him anymore. He looked at the familiar violet robes in his hands and suddenly turned to leave the courtyard. "Big brother!" Tang Li panicked and chased after him, but Long Fei Yi suddenly leapt onto the roof and fled like a madman. "Big brother, wait for me. Where are you going?" Tang Li chased after him, doing his best to run and fly behind Long Fei Yi, afraid that he'd lose him. Ever since he was young, Long Fei Yi had never lost control of himself, except for Consort Wan's death. Even after Consort Wan committed suicide, Long Fei Yi had only chosen to keep quiet. He hadn't done anything out of line. But now Long Fei Yi was clearly out of control. Tang Li was worried that he'd do something impulsive and ruin all the efforts he'd put into restoring his country. Just what did Long Fei Yi want to do? Look for her, of course. What else could he do besides look for her? His only salvation was to find the person he was looking for. Just like that, Long Fei Yi, who hadn't slept or rested for several days, frantically searched through Medical City for an entire day and night. He'd looked everywhere he could find until the next morning. Finally, he dragged his exhausted body to the poison sect's forbidden grounds, to the cliff that Gu Beiwei had fallen off. Tang Li followed behind him. When he saw Long Fei Yi stop at the edge of the cliff, he finally sighed in relief. Tang Li was panting for breath. He was about to sit cross-legged when he suddenly thought of something and broke out in cold sweat. He rushed to Long Fei's side and grabbed his hand. "Big bro, don't take things too hard. If sister-in-law knew that you jumped off, she'd definitely cry herself to death." Why would Long Fei Yi commit suicide? He didn't know why he'd come here either. Perhaps it was to find Gu Beiwei. He wanted to ask Gu Beiwei what he should do. He couldn't calm down at all and couldn't think straight. "Tang Li, look for her. Help me find her. Search outside the city." Long Fei Yi finally looked at Tang Li. "Big brother, how are we supposed to find her? The Shadow Guard and Medical City's guards have been searched multiple times over the past few days. What can we do outside the city? Are we going to search all over the mountains?" Tang Li asked seriously. "Even if we have to search the entire world, we still have to," Long Fei Yi said. "Big brother, can't you calm down?" Tang Li was furious. "I can't." Long Fei Yi was telling the truth. "Big brother, I can tell you who kidnapped her, but you have to answer a question of mine first." Tang Li looked into Long Fei Yi's eyes and was especially serious. Long Fei Yi also looked at him. He didn't allow Tang Li to ask, so he answered first. He said, "That's right. Han Yunxi is a descendant of Western Qin. Will you help me?" Tang Li was stunned at first. Then he fiercely shook off Long Fei Yi's hand. "You used me. You've been using me all this time. You didn't ask me to help you. You asked the Tang sect to help you." He always thought that Long Fei had only helped him become the Tang clan head because he disliked his father and Aunt Ru's prejudices against Han Yunxi. He wanted him to take the reins and strip them of their power. However, he never thought that Long Fei Yi was worried that Han Yunxi's identity would be exposed one day and that the Tang sect would be out of his control. He was holding back. He was determined to be with the princess of Western Qin. Tang Li shook his head in disbelief. "Big brother, you're crazy. She's the princess of Western Qin. The princess of Western Qin. If you don't give the Bailey army, the Tang sect, and the Shadow Guard an explanation, no one will continue to be loyal to you." Long Fei Yi was indifferent to Tang Li's anger. He had already made up his mind when he kidnapped Mute Granny. No matter what, he wanted that woman. Ever since he was young, there was nothing that he truly wanted. There was only her. "Tang Li, I'm only going to ask you once. Will you help me?" Long Fei Yi asked resolutely. Chapter 818. Faced with Long Fei Yi's resolute inquiry, Tang Li realized that it was Long Fei Ye's first time begging him. Accurately speaking, it wasn't begging him. If it was Long Fei Yi, he wouldn't have become the Tang sect's sect master. Today, he wasn't qualified to make Long Fei Yi beg him. Growing up together, no one understood Long Fei Yi better than Tang Li. Actually, Tang Li had already vaguely guessed the truth before, but he wasn't willing to believe it and couldn't accept it. Now, facing Long Fei Yi, he couldn't agree, but he also couldn't refuse. "Brother, it's just a woman." When he said this, even he felt that it was against his heart. He had seen Long Fei Yi make too many exceptions for Han Yunxi. He had also seen how the conservative him, who was seriously obsessed with cleanliness, hugged that woman in front of everyone and deeply kissed that woman. It was simply spoiling her to the bone and loving her to the blood. This kind of person, he had spoiled her for 4 years. How could he not want her just like that? "Brother, even if you don't care about her identity, even if everyone in East Qin doesn't care about her identity, what about her?" Tang Li asked seriously. "She will hate you. She will only think that you are using her." Back then, Long Fei Yi hid Han Yunxi's identity because he was worried about her hatred, right? The hatred that came from the Western Qin princess towards the East Qin crown prince. Two people who loved each other would always be equal. No one had the right to insist that others do the same because of their own sacrifice. There was also no reason to believe that others would do the same. Just like how he could ignore her identity, but he didn't expect her to do the same. Tang Li's words made Long Fei Ye's heart sink. Tang Li sighed. "Brother, actually I quite like Ning Jing, but..." He gave a bitter smile. "How could she really like me and be willing to give birth to my child? Let's not deceive ourselves." Ever since they got married, he had been tormenting Ning Jing a lot, especially during the month they were away. But there had been no news of that woman's pregnancy. It was obvious that she had taken medicine. There was no doubt that Tang Li's feelings for Ning Jing were beyond Long Fei Ye's expectations. However, he didn't have time to think too much about it. He asked coldly, "Do you know who kidnapped her?" Seeing that Long Fei Yi was no longer forcing him to help, Tang Li was secretly relieved. He only said one sentence, and Long Fei Yi immediately understood. He said, "Ning Jing and I have been in a cold war for the past few days. After I went out, I went back twice, but I didn't find Ning Jing in the house. Last night, I waited until midnight before she came back. She was frightened when she saw me." Before the Apricot Woods Conference, Tianning's military officers had already left. Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's businesses in Medical City had long been handed over to Ning Nuo to manage, so it had nothing to do with Ning Jing. What could Ning Jing have to do in Medical City to keep her busy until the middle of the night? Moreover, she'd done it behind Tang Li's back. "Brother, maybe Ning Cheng is in Medical City. I already sent people to investigate the battlefield last night. If Ning Cheng isn't on the battlefield, then he's definitely in Medical City. He must be the one who kidnapped Han Yunxi." Tang Li glanced at the purple muslin robe in Long Fei Ye's hands and said seriously, "Brother, at a time like this, there are only 2 kinds of people who kidnapped Han Yunxi. One is from East Qin, while the other is from Western Qin." Ning Cheng. Long Fei Yi narrowed his eyes. If East Qin wanted to kidnap Han Yunxi, they didn't need to go through so much trouble. They could just ask Chu Shifeng for her. So it had to be someone from Western Qin. The kidnappers must have torn apart Han Yunxi's robes to see if she had a phoenix birthmark. Chu Tianyin of the Nether Clan was still from Western Qin. Over the past few days, he'd sent Gu Beiwa letters asking about Han Yunxi's origins. The Li and Black clans still hadn't found any clues. As for the Wen clan, Long Fei Yi was absolutely certain that they wouldn't kidnap Han Yunxi now. If they wanted to kidnap her, they would have done so long ago. Seeing Long Fei Ye's dangerous expression, Tang Li knew that he'd recovered. "Have you sent people to follow Ning Jing?" Long Fei Yi asked. "Don't worry about me taking care of things. I've already made arrangements." Ning Jing didn't leave the house last night, but she went out early this morning. "I've already sent people to keep an eye on her," Tang Li replied. Long Fei Yi nodded and stared coldly into Tang Li's eyes. Tang Li didn't notice anything strange at first, but he quickly averted his gaze. "Big bro, it's not that I'm helping you, but in any case, I can't accept this. Why should a woman shoulder the grudges of the previous generations? Did she do anything wrong? Long Fei Yi asked. Big bro, aren't you shouldering the grudges of the previous generations? She's the same as you. Neither of you have a choice. You're fated to be enemies in this lifetime. Won't your heart skip a beat if you spend every day with an enemy? Tang Li asked seriously. Long Fei Yi was silent for a long time. In the end, he said indifferently, at the very least, this prince has to ask her personally. Tang Li hesitated for a long time. In the end, he used a stalling tactic. Fine, I promise you. As long as Han Yunxi doesn't hate you or resent you, I'll help you. If she resents you, then don't blame the Tang sect for being merciless. Tang Li added, also, Han Yunxi is an exception. The Tang sect won't show mercy to anyone else, whether they're from the Fiend clan or the D clan. Of course. The killing intent in Long Fei Ye's eyes was even stronger than Tang Li's. The two brothers returned to Medical City to wait for news from their spies. Long Fei Yi wrapped the tattered purple muslin robe around his arm and tied it tightly before pulling down his wide sleeve. Tang Li glanced at it and felt his heart ache for no reason. In fact, he really hoped that Han Yunxi would resent Long Fei Yi. That way, Long Fei Yi would be able to fight a decisive battle with Western Qin. However, his heart ached when he saw this scene. If Han Yunxi really resented Long Fei Yi, how much would Long Fei Ye's heart hurt? In love, whoever loved more would suffer a crushing defeat. Tang Li suddenly realized that his heart was actually more ruthless than Long Fei Ye's. Or perhaps he didn't love her enough. He just liked her a little. After calming down, Long Fei Yi had a lot of things to do. Since Ning Cheng and Ning Jing were suspects, it meant that Ning Cheng was still in Medical City. He asked Vice Academy head Shun to send more people to guard the city gates. At the same time, the poison guards and mercenaries sent by Han Yunxi also arrived. Fortunately, these subordinates still obeyed Long Fei Ye's orders. Long Fei Yi made careful arrangements and waited for news from the spy following Ning Jing. At the same time, he replied to the letters from the Tang sect and Bailey Juanfu. These two letters were received before he even arrived at Medical City. They were all letters inquiring about Han Yunxi's background. He only replied with 5 words. Rumors can't be trusted. He didn't give any explanation. After he finished dealing with the matters at hand, Tang Li immediately rushed over. Brother, she's in the apricot forest. In the apricot forest. Tang Li was still outside the door, so Long Fei Yi flew out. Tang Li was almost knocked over, so he hurriedly caught up. Brother, Ning Jing circled the city several times and finally snuck into the apricot forest. The apricot forest wouldn't be open to the public unless it was a medical academy event. Ning Jing circled the city to avoid being noticed. Moreover, her purpose in entering the apricot forest was even more obvious. Su Donglin followed, but Long Fei Yi ordered, guard your own territory. Don't come over. Long Fei Yi had to be on guard. This was a trick to lure the tiger away from the mountain. As long as he could determine where Ning Cheng was with his current martial arts skills, let alone one Ning Cheng, even 3 Ning Chengs wouldn't be able to escape. Under the secret guidance of the spy, Long Fei Yi saw an abandoned courtyard in the distance. In order to avoid suspicion, Tang Li hid in the dark and didn't appear. Your Highness, this subordinate saw Ning Jing enter that courtyard with my own eyes. This subordinate didn't dare to get too close, so I kept watch here. Until now, I haven't seen her come out, nor have I seen anyone enter or leave. The spy reported in a low voice. Very good. As soon as Long Fei Ye's voice fell, his figure flew out, so fast that no one could see him clearly. All of his worries, fears, and longing were unimportant at this moment. He just wanted to see her. However, when Long Fei Yi broke in, he saw Ning Jing sitting alone in the courtyard, crying. You're the Duke of Qin? Ning Jing exclaimed, and suddenly stood up. Long Fei Yi sensed that something was wrong, so he ignored her and immediately broke into the house. However, He searched all over the house, but he didn't see the person he was looking for. When he returned to the courtyard, Ning Jing's face was still covered in tears, and she looked confused. Of course, this was all an act. Long Fei Yi didn't linger, but turned to leave. This courtyard was abandoned, but one of the rooms had a bed, a table, and clean chairs. Someone had lived here before, and it wasn't Ning Jing at all. This really was a trick to lure the tiger away from its mountain. As soon as Long Fei Yi left, he hurried to the city gates himself. Fortunately, the 4 gates were all quiet, so no one tried to force their way in. Su Donglin, where's Tang Li? Long Fei Yi asked in a low voice. He's still in Apricot Grove, Su Donglin replied. Tell him to stop pretending. Ning Jing has long suspected the Tang clan, Long Fei Yi said. Ning Jing must have suspected Tang Li, which was why she had Ning Cheng leave ahead of time. That was why they'd come empty-handed. At this point, there was no need for Tang Li to pretend anymore. It was fine if they didn't want Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's weapons trade. The Tang clan's assassination weapons were East Qin's greatest help. Before Su Donglin could find Tang Li came over on his own. Big bro, if you guard the east gate, I'll guard the west gate. Seal all the secret passageways. I refuse to believe that Ning Cheng can grow wings and fly out. Where's Ning Jing? Long Fei Yi asked. I tied her up. She can choose between her life and the weapons trade. Tang Li spoke confidently. Big bro, even if she chooses the weapons trade, I can find all the accounts and sources of the goods. In any case, we'll definitely complete the mission. If this was any other time, Long Fei Yi would have told Tang Li to leave without a word, but he didn't this time. He looked at Tang Li strangely. Tang Li avoided his gaze and laughed out loud. This clan head has been waiting for this day for a long time. Big bro, if we still can't find Ning Cheng, we'll hang that woman under the city gates tomorrow and expose her to the sun for 3 days and 3 nights. I refuse to believe that Ning Cheng won't come out. Long Fei Yi said, she's your legal wife. Deal with her as you see fit. Then it's settled, Tang Li said cheerfully as he left, hiding the disappointment in his eyes well. Long Fei Yi was still keeping watch and searching, but Ning Cheng had long left Medical City with Han Yunxi. They'd left last night without alerting anyone. How did they leave Medical City? Chapter 819. Medical City was so heavily guarded, so how did Ning Cheng manage to sneak Han Yunxi out of the city? Actually, Ning Cheng had already taken Han Yunxi out of Medical City the day she regained consciousness. Ning Jing had only gone out in the middle of the night to test Tang Li. Currently, Ning Cheng and Han Yunxi were on their way to Tianing. Han Yunxi was nestled in the carriage while Ning Cheng personally drove the carriage. A few attendants accompanied them as protection. Han Yunxi was exhausted to death, but she couldn't fall asleep. She stuck her head out and asked, Hey, how did you escape? She had been blindfolded and taken out of Medical City. It was obvious that Ning Cheng didn't trust her completely. Ning Cheng drove the carriage as fast as he could, his eyes looking straight ahead as he asked, Has your Highness thought it through? What she needed to think about was naturally acknowledging her status as the princess of Western Qin and shouldering the heavy responsibility of avenging and restoring Western Qin. Han Yunxi laughed coldly. Do I even have the right to think about it? Ning Cheng finally turned to glare at her. Ever since she had compared the D clan to the Nether clan, Ning Cheng had stopped treating her with respect. Now Han Yunxi felt that he was real. Why are you so fierce? I don't have the right to think about it in the first place, so why do you have to make me think about it? In any case, even if I don't want to, I still have to go with you, right? The more Han Yunxi spoke, the colder Ning Cheng's gaze became. Still, Han Yunxi wasn't afraid. Are you going to let me go if I tell you that I don't want to? Finally, Ning Cheng's eyes filled with disappointment and disdain. You can choose to refuse, but I won't let you go. So, before Han Yunxi could finish, Ning Cheng continued, I won't force you, but I will kill you. If you die, the D clan will no longer have a mission. From now on, everyone will live happily and only live for themselves. Han Yunxi gave a start. That really isn't a bad idea, she mused. Ning Cheng suddenly closed in, his eyes flashing with killing intent. Han Yunshi was so scared that she hurriedly leaned back. "Your Highness, this subordinate will ask you for the last time. Have you thought it through?" He spat out each and every word harshly. Han Yunshi's lips quirked up into a smile as she replied easily, "Once I've thought it over, I'll agree to your terms." Even though she hadn't figured out how to tell Ning Cheng about the Feng clan's conspiracy, she had to agree to their request first. If he didn't agree, she wouldn't even have a chance. Han Yunshi smiled beautifully, but Ning Cheng didn't smile. Instead, he became even more serious. "Your Highness, a promise cannot be taken back. Please be more serious." Han Yunshi restrained her smile and said seriously, "Don't worry, I will do what I say." Who knew that Ning Cheng still wasn't satisfied and said, "Your Highness, please swear." "Okay, I swear that if I, Han Yunshi." Han Yunshi was still pondering on what to swear when Ning Cheng said coldly, "If your Highness breaks today's promise, Long Fei Yi will die a horrible death." In that instant, a trace of coldness flashed across Han Yunshi's eyes. However, she concealed it so well that even though they were really close, Ning Cheng didn't detect it. Han Yunshi laughed. "Ning Cheng, do you think that I'm rejecting you because I like Long Fei Yi? Is there any other reason?" Ning Cheng asked in return. Although this reason was very chilling, he still faced it directly. He couldn't think of any other reason that would make Han Yunshi so hesitant to take revenge and restore her country. Even if she didn't know about her background in the past, when the blood of the Western Qin royal family flowed in her body, when she found out about everything, how could she not hate? One's home country was one's only home. How could a person not love their own family and their home country? How could she be indifferent to the hatred of her country? Ning Cheng didn't know that Han Yunshi came from the future. Her soul had nothing to do with the Western Qin royal family. Therefore, he didn't understand. Therefore, he could only attribute everything to love. Other than love, how could he vent his hatred? Han Yunshi slowly pushed Ning Cheng away. "Ning Cheng, my choice has nothing to do with Long Fei Yi or who I love. I want to live for myself, so I'm hesitating." Ning Cheng felt as if his heart had been bitten by something. It didn't hurt, but there was an indescribable feeling. Han Yunshi asked again, "Ning Cheng, if you had a choice, would you live for yourself and be yourself instead of being a servant of Western Qin?" Ning Cheng immediately avoided Han Yunshi's gaze and said, "Your Highness, you and I don't have a choice. Please swear immediately." "Okay." Han Yunshi raised her hand and said loudly, "I, the Princess of Western Qin, swear that if I break today's promise, Long Fei you will die a horrible death." She would always be Han Yunshi, and the one who swore was the Princess of Western Qin. Han Yunshi comforted herself. "Can you tell me how you escaped from Medical City now?" Han Yunshi asked seriously. "There's a secret passage in the poison sect storehouse that leads to the outside of Medical City," Ning Cheng replied honestly. "How did you know?" Han Yunshi was shocked. The head of the 100 Poison sect sent word. Ning Cheng had received a letter from the 100 Poison sect's head after the Wind Clan's letter. Otherwise, he really wouldn't have been able to escape Medical City. "Jun Xie?" Han Yunshi asked suspiciously. From what she knew, Jun Xie should still be with the Wintercrow clan. "No, it's Jun Xie's junior sister, a girl called by Yu Qiao." Ning Cheng explained seriously, "The 100 Poison sect is a branch of the Poison sect. When they learned of the princess's identity, they were willing to serve the Poison sect. They couldn't get in touch with the princess until news of the princess's identity spread. Then they came to the subordinate." Han Yunshi sneered, humbly acknowledging a master isn't the 100 Poison sect style. Ning Cheng looked a little embarrassed. After all, he was the one who had humbly acknowledged a master. Han Yunshi knew he was embarrassed, but she still looked at him coldly. She had never been a kind person. She held grudges, especially when Ning Cheng tore her clothes. She couldn't kill him, but she couldn't let him have it easy either. If Ning Cheng wanted to confirm whether she had a phoenix birthmark on her back, he could have kidnapped her first and found Ning Jing or a servant girl to take a look. She couldn't figure out why Ning Chung would want her to do this. This guy was just too despicable. Ning Chung was embarrassed, but he didn't lose his temper. He said, "This subordinate said before that the Wind clan controls Northern Li's cavalry. Does your highness remember? Could it be that Jun Yixie is a descendant of the Wind clan?" Han Yunshi asked anxiously. "That's right." Ning Chung didn't hide anything from her. Jun Yixie. Han Yunshi muttered to herself, calling him a liar in her heart. If Jun Yixie was a descendant of the Wind clan, he wouldn't have suffered so much on Fisherman's Island before being rescued by his master. Jun Yixie wasn't a descendant of the Wind clan, but his master. Ning Chung had been tricked. The Wind clan really didn't have good intentions. The 100 Poison sect might be a branch of the Poison sect, but that was hundreds of years ago. How did Jun Yixie and the others know about the secret passage to the Poison Grounds? Han Yunshi probed. Someone who knew about the secret passage had to be Jun Yixie's master, a direct descendant of the Poison sect. Perhaps it was her father. This subordinate didn't ask too many questions. The 100 Poison sect often enters the Poison sect's forbidden grounds, so it's normal for them to be familiar with the place, Ning Chung explained. Han Yunshi looked at Ning Chung for a long time before asking, "Ning Chung, Jun Yixie is still far away at the Winter Crow clan. Was it by Yu Qiao who wrote the letter to you?" "That's right," Ning Chung replied honestly. Bai Yu Qiao rushed to the battlefield as soon as East Qin's flag was raised at Long Fei Yi. The letter was first delivered to me from the battlefield. She should have reached the battlefield by now. Does Bai Yu Qiao have full authority to represent Jun Yixie? Han Yunshi asked. Ning Chung nodded again. Han Yunshi didn't understand. Ning Chung was a cautious man. Why did he trust the Wind clan so easily? She continued probing. How can you be so sure that Bai Yanqing is the Wind clan's descendant based on the letter alone? Also, how can you be so sure that the Wind clan isn't the second Nether clan? Ning Chung ordered a servant to drive the carriage while he and Han Yunshi sat inside. He took out Bai Yanqing's handwritten letter from his sleeve. Han Yunshi read it carefully, but didn't find anything special. The letter mentioned the Wind clan's loyalty to Western Qin's imperial family, the 100 Poison sect, and Northern Li's cavalry. However, there was no proof of Jun Yixie's identity. "Your Highness, look at the back," Ning Chung reminded her in a low voice. Han Yunshi flipped the letter over and saw a seal printed on the back with the words West Qin in the center. Around the seal was a circle of lines that looked extremely complicated at first glance. She couldn't make out any patterns, but upon closer inspection, she realized that the lines were actually a coiled dragon. Princess Consort. This is the imperial seal of Western Qin's imperial family. It took the number 1 craftsman 3 years to carve this. This dragon pattern, no one can imitate it. Ning Chung seriously explained. During the war, the imperial family gave the imperial seal to the Wind clan for safekeeping. In these past years, the D and Nether clans have not only been searching for you, but also for this imperial seal. Han Yunshi never expected such a thing to exist, but that wasn't the point. She lowered her voice and probed again. Ning Chung, how can you be sure that the Wind clan isn't a second Nether clan? Ning Chung was a smart man and should know that if the Wind clan was like the Nether clan and had thoughts of betrayal, then the D clan wouldn't be able to resist the Wind clan. There were 2 reasons for this. First, the Wind clan was skilled in military formations. Second, the Wind clan controlled the Northern Li cavalry. Once the D clan and the Long Fei Yi were both injured on the front lines, it wasn't impossible for the Wind clan's cavalry to arrive and destroy the D clan first. Thus, I ask that your highness take back the imperial seal when we reach the army camp. Cloud Realm Trade Consortium will control the Northern Li cavalry's provisions. Even if the Wind clan wants to rebel, they won't have the strength to do so. It wasn't that Ning Chung didn't have his guard up, but he needed the Wind clan's help right now. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to deal with the East Qin army. Ning Cheng's wariness comforted Han Yunxi more or less. As long as Ning Cheng was on guard against the Wen clan, then she'd have a chance to convince Ning Cheng of the Wen clan's schemes. Han Yunxi didn't have much convincing evidence right now, so she figured she'd better keep her cool until she reached the battlefield and met with Bai Yuqiao. Your Highness, it's getting late. Please rest. We'll reach Tianning's capital in 3 days. This subordinate will arrange for you to meet someone. She has news of the Shadow Clan. Ning Cheng prepared to leave as soon as he finished speaking, but Han Yunxi's heart skipped a beat before she pulled him back. What did you say? Chapter 820. Han Yunxi's abnormal behavior made Ning Cheng very suspicious. He wasn't in a hurry to explain. Instead, he lowered his head and stared at her hand. Her hand was tightly gripping his sleeve. Han Yunxi's heart was about to jump out of her chest. How could she have the leisure to care about Ning Cheng's strange gaze? She anxiously asked, "What did you just say? Who has the whereabouts of the Shadow Clan? Where are they?" Ning Cheng still didn't say anything. He just stared at her hand. Han Yunxi immediately let go. "Hurry up and say it." She was the princess, her master. After she made the oath, he regained his respect. But at this moment, he seemed to have forgotten his identity. He allowed her to be anxious and leisurely sat back down. "Princess, why are you so nervous about the whereabouts of the Shadow Clan? What? Have you found your conscience?" Previously, when Ning Jing had cried and told this woman about the Shadow Clan sacrifice, this woman hadn't had this kind of attitude. Han Yunxi finally realized that she had lost her composure and misunderstood. She had almost forgotten that although Tang Li knew Gu Beiwei's identity and knew that Gu Beiwei had fallen off the cliff, Ning Jing didn't know, and Ning Cheng definitely didn't know. Ning Cheng had just said that he had information about the Shadow Clan. It wasn't about Gu Beiwei's whereabouts, but about who the Shadow Clan's descendants were. Aside from the Long Fei Yez people, who else knew about Gu Beiwei's past? Han Yunxi quickly thought of Chu Tianyin. Could it be that the Nether Clan's Chu family was going to switch sides to the Long Fei Yi so soon? Han Yunxi exhaled and pretended to be unhappy. "I've mocked enough. Shouldn't you tell me what's going on? Who knows the whereabouts of the Shadow Clan? Where are the Shadow Clan's descendants?" "Your Highness, the Di and Ing clans are of the same mind. You can't be biased," Ning Cheng said jokingly. Although Han Yunxi was anxious to know the answer, she didn't buy Ning Cheng's argument. She went straight to the point and coldly snorted. "Ning Cheng, the Shadow Clan won't offend you like this. This. She almost called herself Princess Consort again, but she immediately changed her words. "I'll get it back one day." If she continued to call herself princess, then perhaps Ning Cheng would no longer believe anything she said. However, she really couldn't accept the word princess, so she could only use I. Ning Cheng was left speechless. Without Han Yunxi asking, he explained himself. "Someone once used the whereabouts of the Shadow Clan to exchange for your Highness' life. If your Highness wants to know the whereabouts of the Shadow Clan, you should personally go and meet them." Chuchinga? Han Yunxi finally remembered this woman, but she didn't ask any more questions. She knew that Ning Cheng wasn't taking her to Tianning's capital city to find out the whereabouts of the Shadow Clan. He was probably planning to start a coup in the capital city and hang out Western Qin's military banners. When that happened, the Long Fei, you would know her whereabouts. What would he think of her then? How was she supposed to ask that question? How was she supposed to get an answer from the Long Fei Yi? Han Yunxi was melancholy. She didn't have time, nor did she have a path to take. She could only take it one step at a time. Actually, not long ago, Ningcheng had received news that the Long Fei Yi refused to acknowledge Han Yunxi's status as Western Qin's princess. Moreover, he'd issued a high-profile order to investigate the source of the rumors. At the same time, Bai Yanqing had received the news as well. His thoughts were the same as Ningcheng's. Lass, this is the calamity of beauties, understand? Bai Yanqing grinned. Bai Yuqiao shook his head. Master, the Duke of Qin is only doing this to placate the soldiers' morale. How could he have feelings for a Western Qin princess? How about we make a bet? Bai Yanqing was in a very good mood. All right, Bai Yuqiao agreed. I'll bet that the Duke of Qin has no feelings for Han Yunxi. Just wait. The lust bite energy will prove your master right. Bai Yanqing said. Master, what's the lust bite energy? Bai Yuqiao didn't understand. This was the first time Bai Yanqing had mentioned the lust bite energy to Bai Yuqiao. He explained it very clearly, leaving Bai Yuqiao stunned. Only now did he realize how scheming his master was and how much he'd hidden from his senior brother. Master, your disciple still doesn't understand. How can old enemies fall in love with each other? If it were you, Master, would you fall in love with your enemy? Bai Yuqiao asked seriously. Bai Yanqing's originally spirited eyes suddenly dimmed. He didn't answer Bai Yuqiao's question for a long time. Bai Yuqiao was afraid of making him unhappy, so he quickly changed the topic. Master, if we lie to Ningcheng like this, will he believe us? Ningcheng isn't someone who's easy to deal with. He will, at least for the next few months. Bai Yanqing was very sure. He'd already told Bai Yuqiao that when they met Ningcheng and Han Yunxi, he'd pretend to be Jun Yixie's servant. Jun Yixie would teach him the Wen clan's army formation techniques. Jun Yixie would cooperate with Ningcheng as a member of the Wen clan. His identity as a member of the Black Clan wouldn't be revealed for the time being. Master, why do you have to hide senior brother's identity? Bai Yuqiao probed. According to her understanding, although the Black Clan was loyal to the East Qin Imperial Clan, after the West Qin Imperial Clan was annihilated, the Black Clan betrayed the East Qin Imperial Clan and joined forces with the D Clan and Feng Clan to destroy the East Qin Imperial Clan. This is for your senior brother's own good. You don't understand, but he will. Bai Yanqing's tone was clearly unfriendly. Bai Yuqiao didn't dare to ask anymore. You still haven't found the whereabouts of the perplexing butterfly illusion? Bai Yanqing asked again. That group of trash is really useless. This disciple has already ordered people to secretly bring Su Xiaoyu here. This disciple will personally interrogate her. Master, don't worry. Bai Yuqiao honestly reported. Be careful. Don't let the cat out of the bag. Bai Yanqing solemnly reminded. Bai Yanqing thought that his plan was flawless, but he didn't know that Han Yunxi had already seen through him. He also didn't know that Long Fei Yi had already suspected him. Your Highness, if Gu Beiwei is going to die, how are we going to explain this to the Princess Consort? Su Donglin timidly asked. After they couldn't find him in the apricot forest, he had already accompanied His Highness to guard the city gates for a day and a night. His Highness hadn't said a word, so he felt that he needed to find a topic to talk to His Highness. Drag that old fox out and she'll believe you. Long Fei Yi actually spoke up. Back on Celestial Mountain, Heilian's swordsmanship had far surpassed everyone's expectations. It was obvious that he had an expert guiding him from behind. Who else could that expert be but the old fox? Even if it wasn't the old fox who tried to assassinate Gu Beiwei, he still had to be involved. After all, it was Heilian who had been responsible for Song Xiuzi's collusion with the heretical sword sect. In other words, the old fox controlled the heretical sword sect. Your Highness, the old fox. Before Su Donglin could finish, a powerful force came crashing towards him. Fortunately, Long Fei Yi pushed Su Donglin aside, or else he would have tumbled off the city gates. Long Fei grabbed a seed out of thin air. This was the source of the powerful force he'd felt just then. It was the seed of a thorny vine. Long Fei Yi, this old man, and you can't exist under the same sky. At some point, Gu had appeared on the other side of the city gates. His luxurious red robes billowed in the wind as he pointed his sword at Long Fei Yi. His beautiful face was filled with rage. As soon as he emerged from the abyss, Luo Zuishan had told him everything that had happened over the past few days. Han Yunqi was actually a descendant of Western Qin's imperial clan, and she'd gone missing. Luo Zuishan hadn't even finished speaking before Gu Beiwei rushed over to attack Long Fei Yi. No matter how stupid Gu was, he'd still remember Mute Granny. Long Fei Yi, you killed Mute Granny to hide Han Yunqi's identity. You're despicable. Gu cursed. I didn't kill her. Long Fei Yi said, the people you kidnapped died in your territory. If they didn't die because of you, how did they die? Long Fei Yi, do you take this old man for a fool? Gu was furious. He could tolerate Long Fei Yi lying to Han Yunqi, but he couldn't tolerate Long Fei Yi using Han Yunqi like this. Long Fei Yi had long known that Han Yunqi was a Western Qin princess. Therefore, all his love for Han Yunqi was to use her. If someone hadn't exposed the truth, Long Fei Yi would have used Han Yunqi to suppress Western Qin's power. Gu's words silenced Long Fei Yi. Although he hadn't killed Mute Granny with his own hands, she died because of him. Mute Granny was a smart person and understood what he meant. Han Yunqi's secret could only be kept secret with Mute Granny's grave. Did you kill Gu Beiwei? Gu's entire being seemed to be burning with rage. He was burning with agony. He liked Poison Lass so much, but he'd never really fought with Long Fei Yi over her. That was because he knew how much Poison Lass liked Long Fei Yi. Where was Poison Lass now? Would that stubborn, carefree girl cry? How sad would she be? If I said no, would you believe me? Long Fei Yi asked. I don't. Gu Qishao replied without hesitation. Long Fei Yi had never been one to explain himself, much less explain himself. He tossed aside the seeds in his hands and said coldly, I just received news that Han Yunqi was taken to Tianning's capital city by Ningcheng. At that, Gu Qishao sheathed his sword and turned to leave. He was so anxious that even his anger had been replaced by anxiety. Master, you lied to him? Su Donglin muttered to himself. Long Fei Ye's eyes were hooded as he sat on the city gates. It had already been a day and night. All of Medical City's 4 gates and secret passages were tightly guarded, while 3 groups of men were searching the city. Although there was no evidence to prove that Ning Cheng had escaped, he still had to be wary. Still, he had to be on guard against Ning Cheng's escape. If he did, he'd definitely take Han Yunqi to Tianning's capital city first. Last night, he'd sent a request to Tianshan Kenzo for help and a few experts from the Abstinence Courtyard to guard the capital city. But none of them were as reassuring as Gu. Besides him and Gu Beiwei, who else in this world would search like a madman for Han Yunqi? If they couldn't find Ning Cheng by then, he would leave the city to the guards and personally rush to the capital city. Su Donglin saw His Highness's expression and didn't dare to continue the topic. He murmured to the servant by his side, Go check on the Tang clan head situation. Tang Li had said yesterday that if Ning Jing didn't confess, he'd hang her up at the city gates. He didn't know if the interrogation had yielded any results. Ning Jing was locked up in the room where Han Yunqi had disappeared. All of the servants had been called away by Tang Li, leaving only the 2 of them in the room. A day as husband and wife meant endless devotion for the rest of their lives. Tang Li was a gentleman and didn't torture her, but Chapter 821. Although Tang Li hadn't tortured her, his actions were even more frightening. At the very least, in Ning Jing's eyes, this move of his was extremely frightening. Tang Li was tickling her. After being married to Ning Jing for so long, Tang Li didn't even know how many times he'd eaten Ning Jing clean. He He knew this woman's weak spot all too well. Ning Jing was very ticklish at that. As a matter of fact, Tang Li hadn't even made a move. All he did was raise his hands in warning, but she was already backing away step by step with an ashen face. Ning Jing had a metal chain wrapped around her waist, the other end of which hung from the ceiling. Her hands were tied behind her back, and only her feet could move. Moreover, there was a limit to how much she could move. She backed away step by step, wanting to hide, but she couldn't because of the chains. Seeing that she couldn't retreat any further, Tang Li chuckled. Jing, have you thought it through? Are you going to speak or not? Of course Ning Jing knew where Ning Cheng had escaped from, as well as the route Ning Cheng had taken to escape to Tianning's imperial city. However, when she purposely set a trap to lure Tang Li to the apricot woods, she'd steeled her heart. No matter what punishment she had to endure, she wouldn't betray Ning Cheng. Although she'd once wanted to live for herself, she knew that she wouldn't and couldn't betray Ning Cheng. Once she did, it would mean that she'd let down the countless D clan members who'd sacrificed themselves for the sake of Western Qin's revival. At a time like this, loyalty to Western Qin was no longer important. At the very least, she'd never betray her own clan. Cold, Ning Jing stared at Tang Li. Just like in the past, whenever the two of them messed around, he'd always be all smiles, but she'd never treat him kindly. Usually, when he liked to joke around, she would always pour cold water on him. Especially when it came to tickling, she was absolutely serious. Tang Li could only tickle her a few times before he stopped. She didn't know if he was intimidated by her sternness or if he was deliberately sparing her. The room was silent. He was smiling while she was frowning. In a trance, it was as if they were still in the small courtyard of the Tang sect filled with daisies and nothing had happened in Medical City. He didn't know if they had coincidentally thought of the past, but he didn't make a move. Ning Jing also didn't say a word. However, no matter how beautiful the past was, it was all an illusion. He was acting, and she was pretending. Both of them were well aware of it. If it weren't for everything that had happened in Medical City, would there have been a clear winner between them? Would there have been a side that had taken it seriously and given their hearts to each other first? Unfortunately, there was no more chance to determine the victor. The one-year deadline was not up yet, but the play could not continue. In the end, Ning Jing spoke up first. Cold and expressionless, she said, "It's no use even if you kill me. I don't know a thing." Tang Li's smile froze before he slowly withdrew it. His entire being grew very quiet as he walked step by step towards Ning Jing. Ning Jing stared fixedly at him. At this moment, Tang Li was her most infatuated self. His white robes were otherworldly, his aura refined and pure, like an indifferent immortal. Ning Jing couldn't help but recall the scene when Tang Li had gone to Cloud Realm Trade Consortium to ask for her hand in marriage. He'd stood at the door and looked back, his tender voice saying, "Jinger, wait for me to marry you." Yes. His figure and his tenderness were fixed in the inky scenery of the distant mountains, and forever in her heart. Finally, Tang Li's hand broke Ning Jing's train of thought. She allowed him to tickle her waist a few times, but remained indifferent. She endured it, but Tang Li understood her too well. His hands quickly crept up to her armpits. Ning Jing resisted the itch, but when he touched her armpits, she couldn't help but shift her body away. "Are you begging for mercy?" Tang Li asked cold. "When have I ever begged you for mercy?" Ning Jing retorted. "That's right. No matter what happened in the past, Tang Li would always be the one begging for mercy in the end. Even if it was Ning Jing's fault, Tang Li would still lower his head and beg for mercy like a grandson." Tang Li said expressionlessly, "From today onwards, even if you beg for mercy, I won't let you go. Tell me where Ning Ching is, and I'll make you feel better. But if you don't regret it." Ning Jing laughed. "Tang Li, when have I ever regretted my actions towards you?" Tang Li's heart suddenly tightened. He didn't know why, but it hurt. But he quickly ignored it. He didn't hesitate to scratch Ning Jing's armpits. Ning Jing didn't dodge and started to laugh. The more she laughed, the louder she laughed. In the end, she laughed until her eyes were wet. Tang Li's face remained solemn and cold. The two of them were like this, acting out of character. He was serious, she was laughing, and they continued fooling around. In the past, it was harder for him to make a beauty smile than to pluck the stars and fish for the moon. The attendants outside heard the commotion in the room and were puzzled. What was the Tang Clan master doing? Was he still trying to make Ning Jing happy at this juncture? Yes, Ning Jing's laughter sounded so happy. Ever since she married into the Tang Clan, she had never indulged herself and laughed so loudly. When Su Donglin arrived, he also heard the commotion in the room. He was so angry that he immediately ran to report it to His Highness Duke of Qin. But who knew that His Highness Duke of Qin would still say, she's his legal wife, so he can deal with her himself. Su Donglin suddenly understood. He thought, if it was esteemed Wang Fei today, His Highness might not be able to punish her by hand, right? Women are so scary. At the medical academy, Ning Jing finally couldn't take it anymore. She didn't compromise, nor did she beg for mercy. She laughed until she almost couldn't breathe. Ali, I'm pregnant. She didn't realize that she had just called him Ali, and he didn't pay attention to it either. After calling him that for so long, how could he not get used to it? Those last few words caused Tang Li's hands to stop abruptly. She said that she was pregnant. Tang Li was stunned, his eyes wide and mouth agape. Meanwhile, Ning Jing was still laughing, but it wasn't as wanton as before. She smiled slightly, and her smile was so beautiful and blissful. She said, Tang Li, you're going to be a father. She said, Tang Li, if you tickle me again, I won't be able to keep our child if it affects the baby. It was clearly a threat. Was it real or fake? Tang Li suddenly retreated, putting some distance between himself and Ning Jing to calm himself down. He avoided Ning Jing's provocative gaze. Someone, get a doctor here, Tang Li shouted. Ning Jing suddenly laughed out loud. Tang Li, so you actually care about this? She was laughing at him, laughing at his soft-heartedness, laughing at his loss. As soon as she said this, Tang Li instantly calmed down. He said coldly, you're thinking too much. I'm just looking for a doctor to deal with it. You're not qualified to be pregnant with my Tang Clan's child. Fortunately, I've never gotten pregnant. Ning Jing sneered, her expression indifferent. The doctor was just at the door. He knocked on the door, but before he could speak, Ning Jing said, forget it, I'm just lying to you. Tang Li's gaze froze, but it was only for a moment. When he heard the doctor's voice, he was unusually angry. Get lost! Ning Jing secretly heaved a sigh of relief, but Tang Li missed it. He said coldly, I'll give you one last night to think about it. If you don't say it tomorrow, you can prepare to die at the city gates. After he finished speaking, he strode off. Ning Jing lowered her eyes and lowered her head, her entire being growing quiet. She was like a wilted flower whose branches drooped down, never to bloom again. Tang Li went to Long Fei Ye's side and sat down without a word. Long Fei Ye glanced at him without asking anything. If we can't find him tomorrow, help me keep watch. I'll make a trip to Tianning's Imperial City. You'll be in charge of everything here. Don't forget about Gu Beiyue. Long Fei Ye hesitated for a long time before he said in a low voice, if he's dead, I want to see his corpse. Tang Li didn't reply for a long time, as if he'd lost all his soul. Long Fei Ye had to remind him again before he nodded. Understood. Don't worry. After a night of searching without finding anyone, Long Fei Ye set off for Tianning's Imperial City. Bailey Mingxiang and the rest arrived at Medical City late, so they missed Long Fei Yi. Uncle Gao, I think we should go back first. His Highness will return to the army sooner or later, Bailey Mingxiang said. Miss Mingxiang, why don't you find a carriage and follow behind this old man? It's been too tiring for a girl like you to travel all the way. Uncle Gao's heart ached for Bailey Mingxiang. Whether or not His Highness Duke of Qin was here, Bailey Mingxiang could only sit outside the carriage. His Highness was obsessed with cleanliness, so esteemed Wang Fei was the only one who'd ever sat in this carriage. Uncle Gao didn't dare to let Bailey Mingxiang sit in it, and Bailey Mingxiang didn't dare to break the rules either. No need, I'm used to it. Bailey Mingxiang lowered her voice and teased. Ever since I started practicing martial arts, my body hasn't been as delicate as before. But, all right, Uncle Gao, let's hurry back. Bailey Mingxiang knew her father's temper well. She didn't know if she could help, but she had to hurry back as soon as possible. The two of them bid farewell to Tang Li and went back the same way they'd come. When they reached a place where no one was around, Uncle Gao avoided the shadow guard and asked in a low voice, "Miss Mingxiang, you've served esteemed Wang Fei before. Tell me honestly, does esteemed Wang Fei really have a phoenix birthmark on her back?" "No." Bailey Mingxiang didn't hesitate and blurted out, "Uncle Gao, His Highness is already investigating the person who started the rumor. How can you still be suspicious? Besides, who can prove that someone with a phoenix birthmark is a descendant of the Western Qin imperial family?" Uncle Gao nodded thoughtfully. Bailey Mingxiang was afraid that he wouldn't believe her, so she said, "The person who started the rumor must be trying to sow discord. Uncle Gao, you're familiar with the Tang sect. The people of the Tang sect hate esteemed Wang Fei the most. This time, you have to side with esteemed Wang Fei." Uncle Gao nodded. "Of course." Bailey Mingxiang finally let out a sigh of relief. She'd seen the phoenix birthmark before, so she knew what the truth was. His Highness wanted to protect esteemed Wang Fei. As a descendant of the Mermaid clan, how could she not hate the Western Qin imperial family and the Western Qin faction? But Han Yunxi wasn't just a descendant of Western Qin, but her savior as well. She'd leave her hatred to those who wanted to fight for the world. She only knew that the extra time she'd lived was all thanks to that woman's constant protection and encouragement. She'd never forget that woman's words. "I'll definitely be by your side on the day the beauty's blood is completed." Perhaps some people would say that Han Yunxi wouldn't have saved her if she knew her true identity. But Bailey Mingxiang didn't like to assume things that others had already done. After all, even if Han Yunxi wasn't a Western Qin princess, she still had no obligation to save her. Kindness always led to good karma. Unfortunately, far away in Tianing, Han Yunxi had no idea that Bailey Mingxiang was still so grateful to her. Currently, Han Yunxi was staring at Chu Qingge. Chapter 822. Actually, Han Yunxi had long guessed that Chu Qingge was the one who wanted her life in exchange for the whereabouts of the Shadow Clan. The youngest Empress Dowager in Tianing's history was the D Clan's Chu clan member who hated her the most. Chu Qingge treated her hatred for Han Yunxi as the most important thing in her life. If she knew that Han Yunxi didn't care about her at all, would she fall apart? Actually, she was falling apart right now because she'd finally found out the truth. She couldn't compare to Han Yunxi in any way except for her birth status, which was better than Han Yunxi's. Her bloodline was nobler than Han Yunxi's. But who knew that Han Yunxi actually had a bloodline she could never surpass, ignore, or look down upon? The bloodline of Western Qin's imperial clan. Han Yunxi wasn't the Han clan's daughter of the first wife, but the world's noblest princess, Western Qin's princess. Leaving aside her grudges against the founding of the country, she had to admit that only Han Yunxi was worthy of Long Fei, the East Qin crown prince, in terms of bloodline and status. Chu Qingge felt like she'd been utterly defeated. She'd always used her birth status to comfort herself and lie to herself, but now she didn't even have the right to lie to herself. A descendant of the Nether clan was a servant of Western Qin's imperial clan. In other words, she was Han Yunxi's servant. The woman she'd always hated and looked down upon was actually her own master. What could be more ironic than this? Han Yunxi sat lazily in her seat as she studied Chu Qingge. Chu Qingge stood before her, gaping. Her 3 souls and 7 spirits were all in pain, so much so that she wanted to burst into tears. Why? Who could tell her why this was happening? This was simply a nightmare. Neither Han Yunxi nor Chu Qingge spoke. Compared to Long Fei Ye's junior sister, Duanmu Yao, Han Yunxi didn't have much of an opinion about Chu Qingge. I brought them here. Can you tell me the whereabouts of the Shadow Clan now? Ning Cheng said coldly. Chu Qingge hadn't seen Ning Cheng in ages. She even missed Ning Cheng's icy voice. His voice could give her illusions and comfort her heart that was about to go mad with longing. She looked at Ning Cheng for a very long time before she suddenly laughed out loud. Kill her, and I'll tell you. There's only one person left from the Shadow Clan. I know who he is. I've even seen him before. I saw it with my own eyes. You're seeking death. Ning Cheng's killing intent flared as he grabbed Chu Qingge by the throat. Don't be so shameless. Chu Qingge was still laughing. She cast a sidelong glance at Han Yunxi, then stared at Han Yunxi for a long time. Finally, she chuckled and asked, Han Yunxi, do you think you'll be proud of your status? Han Yunxi gestured for Ning Cheng to let go. She had long known of the Shadow Clan's whereabouts, but she hadn't come to see Chu Qingge to humiliate her. She only wanted to get some information out of Chu Qingge's mouth. After all she knew was that Gu Beiwei was a member of the Shadow Clan. As for what Gu Beiwei had done in the past, she wanted to know. Perhaps Chu Qingge would know something she didn't. Faced with Ning Cheng, Han Yunxi could only speak against her conscience for now. Otherwise, she might end up as Ning Cheng's puppet and lose her right to speak. If she allowed Ning Cheng to sense her acknowledgement of her status, then Ning Cheng's loyalty would at least make him treat her with courtesy and respect. She replied, of course. My Western Qin imperial bloodline is the noblest. Ha! Chu Qingge actually spat at her. Fortunately, Han Yunxi dodged in time, giving her quite a fright. Her impression of Chu Qingge was that she was a cold beauty with a good upbringing. Now, she was no different from a madwoman. Impudence! Ning Cheng angrily grabbed Chu Qingge and pulled her aside, away from Han Yunxi. Chu Qingge lost her footing and fell to the ground. She sat there paralyzed before laughing like a madwoman. Han Yunxi, I'm telling you, I hate my birth. I'd rather be the daughter of a commoner. Do you know why? At the sight of Chu Qingge's mental breakdown, Han Yunxi suddenly felt a twinge of heartache for the woman. Although Chu Qingge had fallen into her trap and won Emperor Tianhui's favor for the marriage alliance, it was still because she was a descendant of the Nether clan. Hadn't Chu Qingge been forced to marry Emperor Tianhui by her father and older brothers? Otherwise, the Chu clan would have found a way to resolve Chu Qingge's predicament with their past power in Western Zhou. Han Yunxi suddenly recalled Ning Jing's tear-streaked face. Han Yunxi, do you know that my big sister Ning Jing abandoned her childhood sweetheart and married into the palace at the age of 15? She allowed that old Emperor Tianhui to defile her. Both the Eastern and Western Qin factions had their fair share of grievances. Both of them had the right to resent and hate. But when would such retribution ever end? How many of these innocent women were going to be sacrificed and suffer uncontrollably? Han Yunxi dearly wished that the enmity between the Eastern and Western Qin factions could be resolved, but she knew it was impossible. It wasn't just hatred, but the hegemony of Cloud Realm continent as well. Even people with no old grudges would fight until their heads bled, to say nothing of the Eastern and Western Qin factions, who would be willing to give up the world on a silver platter. If you were the daughter of a commoner, then you wouldn't have needed to marry Tianhui. Han Yunxi finally said something serious to Chu Qingge. It was her heartfelt words. But Chu Qingge only laughed maniacally. Han Yunxi, I knew it. I knew you wouldn't understand. How could someone like you understand? Had she guessed wrong? Han Yunxi really didn't understand. Then why? Because I love him. I love him very, very much. I didn't want to be his enemy the moment I was born. Chu Qingge practically roared the words. Han Yunxi, I'm telling you, I love Long Fei Yi. Even if I'm a descendant of the Nether clan, I still don't hate Long Fei Yi. Because I love him. Han Yunxi, I love him even more than you, huh? Chu Qingge had really lost her mind. She couldn't stop laughing. She'd finally found a place where she could beat Han Yunxi. She loved Long Fei Yi more than Han Yunxi did. Han Yunxi was proud of her identity as the princess of Western Qin. She was proud of her status as Long Fei Ye's enemy. She must hate Long Fei Ye to the core after finding out about her past, right? Ha! Han Yunxi, you've lost. You've lost. You don't even have the right to love him. Ha ha. Chu Qingge was still laughing, but her face was now covered in tears. Han Yunxi, I dare to love him. I dare to say it out loud. Do you dare? You don't, you won't. Ha ha. Han Yunxi's heart was no longer filled with pity. She stared expressionlessly at Chu Qingge without a word. Ning Cheng grew angrier the more he heard. He suddenly raised his sword and interrupted Chu Qingge's madness. Enough! Who's the descendant of the Shadow Clan? If you won't tell me, I'll kill you. Han Yunxi wanted to stop him, but it was too late. Ning Cheng hadn't moved his sword, but Chu Qingge herself had thrown herself at Ning Cheng's sword. Ning Cheng gave a start. He was very surprised. Why aren't you letting go yet? Han Yunxi immediately rushed over and scolded Ning Cheng. Only then did Ning Cheng release his sword. Han Yunxi held Chu Qingge in her arms and didn't dare to draw her sword. She ordered anxiously, find a doctor and bring a large amount of medicine to stop the bleeding. Hurry! Ning Cheng hadn't asked if he'd really killed Chu Qingge after finding out who the descendant of the Shadow Clan was. He never expected her to be so unafraid of death. He quickly went to call for help. Han Yunxi held Chu Qingge in her arms and warned her cold voice. Chu Qingge, I'm telling you now. If you like Long Fei Yi, you'd better live on and tell him yourself. Duanmu Yao even told him herself. But what about you? It's no use telling me so much. Go find him yourself. Han Yunxi suddenly thought of a saying. In true love, there are no love rivals. Chu Qingge's love was completely different from Duanmu Yao's. I'm already dirty. I don't have the right to tell him. Chu Qingge suddenly coughed up multiple mouthfuls of blood. She clutched Han Yunxi's hand and used the last of her life to beg Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi, do you dare to keep loving him? I beg you, Han Yunxi, I beg you to keep loving him and kill Ning Cheng, all right? Han Yunxi, you can't lose to me. Chu Qingge couldn't hold on any longer. She stared fixedly at Han Yunxi as she died in Han Yunxi's arms. Han Yunxi never thought that Chu Qingge would die in her arms like this. Chu Qingge probably never thought she'd end up like this either. Han Yunxi's heart felt like it had been bitten by something. It was extremely painful. Why was love so hard? She murmured, Chu Qingge, do you know that I just wanted to ask Long Fei Yi a question? I wanted to ask him if I wasn't the princess of Western Qin, would he still like me? If he did, I'd definitely be braver than you. As Han Yunxi spoke, she gently closed Chu Qingge's eyes so she could rest in peace. Ning Cheng was standing by the door. He only knew that Han Yunxi and Chu Qingge were speaking in low voices, but had no idea what they were talking about. When the doctor arrived, Han Yunxi said, No need. She's free now. What did she say to you? Was it about the whereabouts of the Shadow Clan? Ning Cheng rushed over and almost bumped into Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi gave him a deep look before Ning Cheng backed away. This subordinate has offended you. Princess, please forgive me. I'll remember all of your crimes. Han Yunxi said unhappily. Princess, what did she say? Ning Cheng was impatient. Over the past few years, the Shadow Clan had been the most urgent to find out the whereabouts of the Imperial Clan. She said that after the Shadow Clan comes Gu Beiwei. Han Yunxi hid the truth about the dark-robed assassin and pretended to sigh with emotion. I didn't expect this at all. Ning Cheng was so surprised that he slapped himself. He'd imprisoned Gu Beiwei in the past. Ning Cheng had no idea that Gu Beiwei and Long Fei Yi were working together, much less that Chu Tianyin had returned to Western Zhou to start the war under the orders of Gu Beiwei and Long Fei Yi. He'd always treated Gu Beiwei as a mere doctor. I just remembered something. Han Yunxi pretended to be surprised. That year in the Heaven Pit, a white-robed gentleman who knew the shadow technique kidnapped me. Could he be Gu Beiwei? At that time, Jun Yixie was also there. Jun Yixie. Ning Cheng looked pensive. Yes, he was there. Moreover, Han Yunxi became angry and told him about how Jun Yixie had done something to her and how the white-robed gentleman had saved her. The complex look in Ning Cheng's eyes became even more intense. Seeing this, Han Yunqi finally knew how to convince Ning Cheng. Chapter 823. After Han Yunqi told Ning Cheng about Jun Yixie's improper behavior towards her, Ning Cheng sat there by himself for a long time without saying a word. Stop when appropriate was a very profound skill. If used well, it would yield twice the results with half the effort. If not, it would all crumble. Han Yunqi stopped there and let Ning Cheng remain silent. She didn't take the initiative to say anything else. Of course, if Ning Cheng asked her questions, she'd answer them without question. In the end, Ning Cheng said seriously, Jun Yixie didn't tell me such a big thing. Why? Han Yunqi smiled coldly. He offended me, but he didn't dare to admit it. At least now that he knows you're looking for the Shadow Clan's whereabouts, shouldn't he tell me? I thought Gu Beiwei was protecting me because of the poison beast, but it's laughable now that I think about it. Why would a descendant of the Shadow Clan need a poison beast? He's not like Jun Yixie's poison skills, nor can he fight the poison beast. Ning Cheng nodded, then suddenly asked, Is there anything else? Han Yunqi almost didn't know how to react. What? Princess is suspecting Jun Yixie, isn't she? Besides that, is there anything else that's aroused Princess's suspicions? Ning Cheng asked seriously. Han Yunqi was surprised. Only now did she realize that Ning Cheng was much smarter than she'd imagined. But it made sense. Ning Cheng was the boss behind Cloud Realm Trade Consortium, the master of the Ning Clan troops, and Tianning's Prince Regent. He could do business, lead troops, and scheme in politics. He was simply a genius who crossed over from another world. If he wasn't smart, how could he be where he was today? She recalled how he'd tricked the Nether Clan's Chu clan and even tricked Long Fei Yi to seize control of Tianning. Long Fei Yi was a very vengeful man back then. Han Yunqi thought that it must be Ning Cheng's docile and respectful attitude that made her forget that he was actually a fierce wolf. Han Yunqi originally wanted to hide the matter of the black-clothed assassin and let Ning Cheng investigate it himself. At this moment, she changed her mind. When faced with such a smart person, rather than beating around the bush, it was better to be straightforward with him. What's more, his current attitude was very frank. If Han Yunqi continued to hide it, it would seem that she had ulterior motives. She said, Ning Cheng, I'm not suspecting him, but I'm sure he's up to no good. Jun Yixie didn't say anything because he didn't want you to find the Shadow Clan. You all know that the Shadow Clan was almost completely wiped out back then. Moreover, the Shadow Clan is just a shadow guard. They aren't a powerful force. They don't have any military or financial support for the recovery of Western Qin. What is Jun Yixie afraid of about Gu Beiwei? Seeing that Ning Cheng was seriously pondering, Han Yunqi continued, Ning Cheng, the Shadow Clan's existence is only related to my personal safety. He doesn't want you to find the Shadow Clan, so he definitely doesn't want me, Han Yunqi, to live well. He dares, Ning Cheng said coldly. Han Yunqi went along with his intentions and said, Of course, there's another possibility, which is that Jun Yixie has something on Gu Beiwei, but he doesn't dare to say it. Although Ning Cheng nodded, he didn't completely believe Han Yunqi's words. After all, Han Yunqi didn't give him a clear conclusion, but provided two doubts. As for the truth, he still had to find Gu Beiwei to know. Between the Shadow Clan and the Wind Clan, Ning Cheng had absolute trust in the Shadow Clan. Princess, where in Medical City is Gu Beiwei in seclusion? Ning Cheng asked seriously. Han Yunqi smiled bitterly and stared at him silently. Princess, Ning Cheng was a little uneasy. On the night that Long Fei Yi raised his troops, Gu Beiwei was attacked by an assassin and fell into the deepest abyss of the poison sect's forbidden grounds. They went down to search for him for a long time, but couldn't find him, Han Yunqi said mildly. Ning Cheng froze. Han Yunqi told Ning Cheng everything that happened that night, but she didn't mention that the dark-robed assassin had used Celestial Mountain's sword skills. She couldn't say this even if she was beaten to death. Otherwise, Ning Cheng would not only doubt her words, but also her stance. Ning Cheng's attitude towards Long Fei Yi was absolute enmity. He trusted anyone but Long Fei Yi. So you suspect that the assassin is from the poison sect? Ning Cheng asked. It must be someone from the poison sect and a direct descendant at that. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to cure my poison so quickly, Han Yunxi said confidently. Ning Cheng's brows furrowed even tighter. Han Yunxi accidentally caught sight of Long Fei Ye's furrowed brows and hurriedly averted her eyes. She secretly laughed at her poor eyesight, but she knew it was only because she missed that man too much. A direct descendant of the poison sect, the princesses. Ning Cheng was incredulous. Even if he isn't my father, he must be an elder. Why doesn't he recognize me? Why did he kill Gu Beiwei? He's ungrateful. The poison sect was rehabilitated all thanks to Gu Beiwei. Han Yunxi said indignantly. Why must he be an elder? Ning Cheng countered. It's possible that he's from the same generation, because he's very likely Jun Yi Xie's master. Han Yunxi got straight to the point. I'm sure Ning Nuo is well aware of Jun Yi Xie's imprisonment on Fishery Island. Han Yunxi told him everything about Fishery Island's poison fog and the Lost Path poison duel. She pointed the spearhead at the Wind Clan. Slap! Ning Cheng shot to his feet, fury dancing in his eyes. If he still couldn't figure out what was going on after knowing so much, he might as well quit his job. Jun Yi Xie wasn't a member of the Wind Clan. He was just a spokesperson. Han Yunxi saw that things were going well and hurriedly reminded him. Ning Cheng. Back then, the Nether Clan's Chu clan raised the banner of reviving Western Qin. Your D clan knew that the Nether Clan had ulterior motives, but did the Wind Clan know as well? Why didn't they show their faces? Why did they wait until Long Fei Yi mobilized his troops? Also, my identity was exposed the moment Long Fei Yi mobilized his troops. Who was the one who did that? Han Yunxi asked. Jun Yi Xie's master is your father, so he knows about your origins. Ning Cheng immediately denied it. He knows about Lady Tianxin's origins, so he knows about your identity. He knew you were Western Qin's princess from the moment you were born. Han Yunxi had never felt so good about Ning Cheng before. She nodded excitedly. Not only did he hide it for so many years, he only revealed it to the public today. He doesn't even acknowledge you. Such motives? Ning Cheng's beautiful eyes narrowed into slits, filled with a dangerous aura and even a hint of viciousness. Once again, it reminded Han Yunxi that the man in front of her wasn't a docile sheep, but a wild wolf that could bite a person to death. For the first time, Han Yunxi rejoiced in Ning Cheng's loyalty to Western Qin and his trust in her. Otherwise, heaven knows how much time and effort she'd have to spend to expose the Wind Clan's lies. It didn't matter how much effort she put into it, but she didn't have much time left. She looked at Chu Qing's sickly, emaciated body on the ground and felt grateful that this woman had found a way to convince Ning Cheng. Ning Cheng paced back and forth in the room before coming to a decision. Princess, Tianning has long fallen under this subordinate's control. This subordinate plans to hang up the Western Chu banner tomorrow. We won't go to the army, but stay in the palace and have Bai Yuqiao pay his respects. No matter what, he couldn't let Bai Yuqiao stay in the army any longer. Heaven knows what kind of intentions she had. Let's get the Imperial Jade Seal first before we hang up the banner, Han Yunxi intoned. As long as you're here, Princess, it won't affect us much, Ning Cheng said. Ning Cheng had no idea that Han Yunxi's actions would have a massive impact. Once the banner was hung, she'd officially be the princess of Western Qin and lead the D and Wind clans against the Long Fei Yi. What would Long Fei Yi think of her then? Han Yunxi remembered clearly that Long Fei Yi had once asked her if she'd bear a grudge against East Qin if she was the princess of Western Qin, or if she'd want to restore her country. Her answer back then had always been yes. Once the two sides officially clashed, would she still have a chance to ask that question? No matter what, Han Yunxi had to stop Ning Cheng from hanging up the banner. It was impossible to see Long Fei Yi now, so she had to find a reliable person to pass on the problem to Long Fei Yi. Han Yunxi began to think nervously. Just what kind of reason should she use to convince Ning Cheng? Finally, she came up with a brilliant idea. She had Ningqing sit down and lowered her voice to speak to him. Ningqing listened carefully before giving her a thumbs up. Brilliant. Truly brilliant. This subordinate admires you. Han Yunqi finally exhaled. She too felt that her move had been too brilliant. If not for the urgency of the situation, she might not have come up with such an idea. I'll be able to see Han Yunqi's biological father very soon. That very day, at Han Yunqi's request, Ningcheng gave Chu Qingge a grand funeral and sent the little emperor, who wasn't even 3 years old, to the medical academy. Esteemed Wang Fei, the medical academy is under Long Fei Ye's control. This isn't appropriate. Ningcheng didn't tell Han Yunqi. What does this have to do with him? Medical City sealed off the city to search for the missing person only because I'm the head of the medical academy and the head of the poison sect. Long Fei Yi still has the authority to order around Department Head Ju. I'm afraid that he still refuses to acknowledge my identity and misled the department head. Han Yunqi pretended to laugh coldly as she spoke. When I admit my identity in the future, Medical City won't give Long Fei Yi any face. Ningqing looked at Han Yunqi and recalled her previous oath. In the end, he believed her words. You don't have to send him there in your name. Just send him there in the name of Tianning's imperial clan. Han Yunqi sighed. Medical City has a responsibility to him, so they won't refuse. In the end, he's still a pitiful child. Don't let him attend the funeral. All right. Ningcheng agreed easily. Han Yunqi disguised herself as a court lady and attended Chu Qingge's funeral. Once the ceremony was over, Ningcheng sent by Yu Qiao a secret missive. He didn't say whether he'd already kidnapped Han Yunqi, but only asked by Yu Qiao to bring the Imperial Jade Seal to the capital. Han Yunqi couldn't sit still in her room. In the end, she decided to take a risk. As soon as she left the room, her attendant bowed respectfully. Your Royal Highness, where are you going? Compared to Medical City, Ningcheng was much less guarded against her. This was all thanks to Han Yunqi's malicious oath. Most of the guards by her side were there to protect her, not to spy on her. Han Yunqi had a chance to escape, but there was no need for her to do so. There was nowhere safer than Ningcheng's place. She had no idea what Long Fei Ye's attitude was. Perhaps she'd die if she ran to Long Fei Ye's place. Thinking up to here, she couldn't help but smile bitterly. She couldn't even ask him the question she wanted to ask him face to face. I want to see that little emperor. Have someone lead the way, Han Yunqi said. He's with Grand Concubine Ning. This subordinate will take you there. The attendant was very attentive. A crafty look flitted past Han Yunqi's eyes before she feigned indifference. We'll be sending him off tomorrow morning. Have you packed up your luggage? Chapter 824. Han Yunqi's arrival at Ning An's palace surprised Ning'an. She was about to pay her respects when she was stopped. Ning'an was much younger than Han Yunqi expected. Although she was Ning Cheng's older sister, she was only a year or two older than him. Han Yunqi couldn't see the calmness of a woman who chanted Buddhist scriptures all year round. Instead, she seemed capable and sharp. Han Yunqi couldn't help but think of Ning Jing, who'd cried her eyes out in front of her. She didn't know how she and Tang Li were doing. Some women might cry, but the burden on their shoulders didn't lose out to a man's. The strength in their bones wouldn't lose out to a man either. Ning Jing and Tang Li's dispute over weapons and assassination weapons had now become a struggle between Western Qin and East Qin imperial clans. The Tang clan was Long Fei Ye's most hidden power. Even though Long Fei Ye's identity as a member of the East Qin imperial clan and the Bailey armies by clan had been exposed, Han Yunqi still didn't know about the Tang clan. How much did Ning Jing know about it? Your Royal Highness, Long Zun is in the back courtyard. This subordinate will take you there. Ning An's words interrupted Han Yunqi's train of thought. The little prince's name was Long Zun, a name bestowed upon him by Emperor Tianhui himself. After ascending the throne, his reign name was Yong Guang. Although he was the emperor, the number of times he'd attended court could be counted on one hand. No one outside the palace treated him as such, much less inside. Everyone simply called him by his name. Others said that a mother's status depended on her son's. But in his case, a son followed his mother's footsteps. Han Yunxi passed through the room and saw a small bundle on the table. It had to be Long Zun's luggage. She purposely slowed her steps to observe the room. It was obvious that this room had been temporarily vacated for Long Zun and his wet nurse. Ning Yin's bedroom was on the other side. Before Chu Qing's death, Long Zun had always been with her. "That's all you packed? Is it enough?" Han Yunxi asked casually. "That's all he has." Chu Qing didn't care about the child when she was alive, so she never gave him anything. "These are all clothes." Ningen saw that Han Yunxi's expression wasn't very good, but she didn't speak either. She wondered why Han Yunxi would worry about Chu Qing's child when she and Chu Qing had been rivals for so long. Han Yunxi didn't leave, but slowly sat down. She opened the luggage and asked unhappily, "You're the one who makes the decisions in the Imperial Harem. Tianning's Imperial clan isn't weak, and your Cloud Realm Trade Consortium is rich and overbearing. Do you only lack a few clothes for this little doll?" "I'm innocent, Your Highness," Ningen hurriedly explained. "The allowance for the harem is given by this subordinate. What should be given to her has always been given according to the Empress Dowager's specifications." The child is Chu Qing's own, but she doesn't care. How can an outsider care so much? "That's true." Han Yunxi smiled coldly. She picked out a few pieces of clothing from the luggage and looked at them with interest. For a long time, she didn't speak. Ningen had no idea what Han Yunxi was planning, but her eyes never left Han Yunxi's hands. Of course, Han Yunxi was racking her brains to think of a way to get Long Zun to deliver the questions she wanted to ask. For one thing, she couldn't let Ningen find out. For another, the luggage would pass through countless hands on Long Zun's journey from Tianning to Medical City. How could she guarantee its safety? For another, how was she supposed to deliver it to someone she trusted in Medical City? This was a risky move. As long as something went wrong and Ning Cheng found out the truth, Han Yunxi would be finished. She couldn't even imagine what a wolf in sheep's clothing like Ning Cheng would do to her. However, this was her only chance. "Your Highness, is there something wrong with these clothes?" Ningen was the first to lose her cool. Han Yunxi arched a brow at her. "What do you think?" "This subordinate." Ningen thought for a while. "These are the clothes that the child usually wears. There's nothing wrong with them." Han Yunxi immediately tossed aside the clothes in her hands and swept everything on the table to the floor. "If the medical academy's people see these things, won't they curse our Western Qin for being so heartless that we can't even treat a child well? Chu Qing is already dead, so the child's in the Ning clan's hands. The Ning clan has to take responsibility for him. If you can't even treat a child well, how can your Ning clan conquer the world for this princess? How can you treat the people well?" Han Yunxi stood up and murmured, "Ningen, losing the Ning clan's face is a small matter, but losing Medical City's heart is a huge matter. Gu Biyue's whereabouts are unknown, and I'm not in the city. Right now, the Medical Academy is under the joint leadership of the Vice Council and Council of Elders. Xin Jueming's words are in charge of the Vice Council, while Luo Zuishan's words are in charge of the Council of Elders. These two detest child abusers the most. Back then, Gu Yintian even wanted to protect Ling Gai, but these two were the ones who opposed him to the end and expelled him from Medical City." Ningen immediately understood Han Yunxi's words. Although Han Yunxi was more capable of controlling Medical City than Long Fei Yi, the Ning clan couldn't afford to offend Medical City. Once Western Qin's Imperial clan raised its flag and officially fought with East Qin for control of the world, Medical City's support would be crucial. Whether it was in the medical field or in the hearts of the people, it would have a huge impact. Not only could the Ning clan avoid offending Medical City, they had to curry favor and leave them with a good impression. In other words, Han Yunxi was reminding her that sending Long Zun over was the best chance to curry favor with Medical City. "Many thanks to Your Highness for the advice." Ningen rejoiced. A sly glint flashed through Han Yunxi's eyes, and she said in all seriousness, "No need to thank me. Just do it well." Everything is for the sake of our Western sheen. Ningen immediately ordered people to buy all kinds of clothes, shoes, hats, and other things for Longzun. Han Yunshi listened silently and finally added, "How can a wet nurse be enough? He should at least have a sensible nanny, a few maids and eunuchs, and bodyguards to protect him. It would be best if he had a page boy to accompany him." Ningen looked at Han Yunshi with a puzzled expression and some suspicion. "Is it a lot?" Han Yunshi asked. "Your Highness, wouldn't this be too much and end up making a fool of ourselves?" Ningen asked. Han Yunshi impatiently rolled her eyes at her. "If you don't do this, how can you show your compassion for this child who was forced into labor? He's different from other children. Even if it's too much to show him more care, it's understandable." "Your Highness, this child is already an orphan. If we send him to Medical City, he won't be able to live like a pampered emperor, right? Even if we send these people over, Medical City will return them." Ningen said, "That's exactly what I want. Once they return them, you can send a few more over to show your sincerity. Moreover, you can send them in your own name. In this way, won't you and Vice Academy Head Shin become familiar with each other?" Han Yunshi sighed helplessly. "Ningen, when it comes to business, you're definitely not as good as your sister." For a moment, Ningen couldn't find any words to refute Han Yunshi. She felt that Han Yunshi's move could really win over Medical City's heart and pave the way for the future. She accepted it all and immediately ordered people to do as Han Yunshi said. "Remember, you must find someone you can rely on," Ningen said seriously. Han Yunshi sipped her tea while blinking her sly eyes. No one knew what she was thinking. Longzun was originally supposed to be sent away today, but because of Han Yunshi's interference, it could only be delayed for 2 days. Han Yunshi was immersed in her own thoughts when suddenly, a child's cry came from the backyard. Han Yunshi hurried over and saw Longzun's wet nurse struggling for his life, wailing loudly and calling out from time to time, but she couldn't make out what he was saying. "What's going on?" Han Yunshi asked. "He was just like this when he was sent here. He was playing well when he suddenly started crying. I can't even coax him. I don't know what he wants to do," Ningen replied. "He still can't speak?" Han Yunshi asked in shock. "He doesn't even know how to say mother." The wet nurse said that this child learns slower than other children of the same age. "He's already 2 years old, but he's only just learned how to talk and walk," Ningen answered truthfully. "I'm afraid it's because of the premature birth." Han Yunshi's heart felt stifled, and she couldn't help but think of Gu. At this time, Longzun cried out again and pointed outside the door. "Is he going to be unable to find his mother?" Han Yunshi asked. The wet nurse hurriedly handed the crying Longzun over to a palace maid to deal with, and quickly walked over. "Your Highness, this child won't look for his mother." The number of times Empress Dowager Chu held him can be counted with 5 fingers. Normally, in the palace, even if Empress Dowager Chu sat in front of him, he wouldn't pay attention to her. He still doesn't know what a mother is. I'm afraid it's because this place is unfamiliar that he's looking for his mother. Hurry and take him out. Don't disturb your Highness, Ningen reprimanded unhappily. She, who had been infertile for many years, always felt complicated when she saw a child. The wet nurse hurriedly carried Longzun over. Longzun saw that Han Yunshi had suddenly quieted down. He looked at her for a while, then his small hand pointed outside the door, and he suddenly cried out, "Mother!" He wanted to find his mother. Even if his mother didn't want him, he still wanted his mother. For a moment, everyone was silent, leaving only the child's cries. In a child's world, there was no such thing as good or evil. There were no statuses or benefits, only dependents connected by blood. This child didn't know what kind of person Chu Chinga was or whose hands he was in, much less the current situation in Cloud Realm Continent. All he knew was that he had a mother, who said he wouldn't look for her. In this world, even a child as young as him had been hurt. What was the point of all the fighting for benefits? They couldn't even satisfy the wishes of a little child. So how could they have the face to call themselves powerful? Eastern and Western Sheen hated each other. But had they ever considered how many innocent commoners would hate them as well? Hurry and take him back. Ningen suddenly raged, her expression fearful and uneasy. She'd completely forgotten herself. After serving Emperor Tianhui for so many years, how could she not have children? But she wouldn't allow herself to have any. As the cries faded into the distance, Han Yunxi and Ning both exhaled in relief. Ning in Eastern, Western Qin and Eastern, Western Qin used to live in harmony with each other. Just who instigated the civil war back then? Han Yunxi asked seriously. She'd learned from Long Fei Yi that the floods in the south had caused plagues and famine. Both Eastern and Western Qin had sent out imperial envoys to fight the floods. But Western Qin had spread rumors among the victims that the East Qin crown prince was the reincarnation of a star of calamity who'd bring endless calamities to Cloud Realm continent. Back then, the East Qin emperor was sickly and weak. The crown prince's ascension to the throne was imminent, so Western Qin's rumors were used by the East Qin imperial princes. After the emperor passed away, a power struggle broke out and destabilized the court. Western Qin seized the chance to start a war. Chapter 8:25. Both sides became enemies and fought a civil war, so now they both have their own opinions. Han Yunxi knew that Ning would say the same thing as Long Fei Yi, but she never would have thought that it would be different to this degree. Ning said that in the past, there was a serious disagreement between Eastern and Western Qin. This was a reason why Western Qin decided to go to war. Your Highness, there was a large dam in the middle of the Sand River that stopped the flood, protecting a large province downstream, as well as countless villages and fields. That year, there was a storm and a mountain flood upstream. The flood passed through the middle of the Sand River, submerging many villages and threatening an iron mine. That iron mine belonged to the East Qin crown prince. In order to protect the iron mine, East Qin decided to destroy the dam and divert the water downstream, sacrificing the people downstream. At that time, the East Qin emperor died of illness, and the princes were fighting for the throne. The crown prince was in a rush to build weapons, so he sent the army to destroy the dam. Western Qin had no choice but to send out troops to protect the dam. East Qin thought that our army was trying to steal the mine and sent out troops, using the Black Race army to destroy our Western Qin. If it wasn't for the Nether Race's betrayal, the princess might not have. Although Ning An's voice was calm, her eyes betrayed her heart. Han Yunxi could see her anger and unwillingness. This anger and unwillingness was very similar to when Long Fei Yi told her this part of the history. It was very real and couldn't be faked. It was natural for them to have their own opinions, but if they didn't have the same opinion, then it would be abnormal. Long Fei Yi had told her about the serious floods in the south, but why didn't he tell her about the dam or the mine? According to East Qin, the war was a plot by Western Qin. Western Qin instigated internal strife in East Qin and took advantage of the situation. According to Western Qin, the war was caused by the destruction of the dam. What was the truth? Han Yunxi hesitated a bit before probing. I remember that Gu Beiwei told me that during the war, there were rumors in the disaster area that the East Qin crown prince was a star of disaster. Is there such a thing? Han Yunxi silently apologized to Gu Beiwei in her heart. If she said that it was Long Fei Yi who said it, Ningen would probably be angry. She could only use Gu Beiwei's name to speak properly. Ningen gave a cold laugh. This was a lie made up by the East Qin princes to seize the throne. Now it seems that the East Qin prince is a disaster. If he did not protect the iron mine, Western Qin would not have rashly sent troops. Han Yunxi nodded thoughtfully. She suddenly had a terrifying thought. Was there a misunderstanding in the past? However, she quickly denied her own thoughts. How could she believe Long Fei Yi's explanation? Long Fei Yi already knew that she was the princess of Western Qin. How could he tell her the truth of the war? On the other hand, Ningen had no reason to lie to her. Han Yunxi sat for a while before leaving. She had to finish writing the letter before Long Zun was sent away. She had already thought of how to write the letter. She could not bear to do anything to a pitiful child like Long Zun, so she could only wrong the others. Not long after Han Yunxi left, Ning Cheng came over. Knowing that Han Yunxi had just left, he turned around to leave, but Ningen called out to him. "You just came, and you're already leaving? So you didn't come to see me?" Ningen lightly asked. Who would have thought that Ning Cheng would actually give an unsound and continue to leave? Ningen reached out to stop him. "Family head, you should know your status." Before, Ningen followed the rules of the palace and called Ning Cheng King Ning. But now she called him family head. This meant that Ningen was reminding Ning Cheng of his status, his responsibilities, and what he could and could not do. "Move aside." Ning Cheng's voice was completely emotionless. It was extremely cold, like an iceberg that kept people 1,000 li away. One would never be able to see his heart. Only in front of Han Yunxi would he be happy, angry, and anxious. Everyone sighed with emotion at the sight of the lofty Ning Cheng having to put down his airs in front of the princess. But Ningen knew that Ning Cheng wasn't submitting or being respectful, but being confused and lost. Perhaps that was why Han Yunxi wasn't like Chu Qingde, who felt that Ning Cheng was similar to Long Fei Yi. His joy at finding his master should have died down long ago. He should be back to his usual prudent, steady, and calm self. Everything in the D clan was still under his control and had to be controlled by him. The princess of Western Qin was only a symbol of faith. She couldn't control anything, so the last thing he should lose was his sense of control over himself. Ningen had seen all of Ning Cheng's actions since their return. Her heart was full of worries, so she had to remind him. Ning Cheng's ice face was expressionless. After a while, he asked coldly, "Is there anything else?" Ningen told him about Long Zun, and he agreed with Han Yunxi's words. In a low voice, he said, "Arrange for 2 spies. Ning Jing hasn't sent word for days. I need information from her side." Understood. Ningen had the same idea. Jing, she won't be in trouble, right? She's still arguing with Tang Li about my departure, so nothing's going to happen. Ning Cheng trusted Ning Jing more than Ning or Ning Nuo. Urge Ning Nuo on the matter of the army rations. Don't drop the ball at a critical moment. Although South Ning's commander-in-chief's estate controlled most of Cloud Realm Continent's grain production areas, Cloud Realm Trade Consortium wasn't easy to deal with. They could still buy grain from them. In this world, there were plenty of people who went against their conscience to make money from war. Moreover, Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's secret of being a descendant of the D clan had already been exposed. There were even more grain merchants willing to work with them. Ning Jing mused that the Tang clan was a hidden power that never got involved in worldly conflicts, much less a huge one between 2 imperial clans. If the Tang clan elders knew about Ning Jing's status as a D clan member, it'd be even harder for them to agree to work with the arms trade. If she couldn't complete her mission within a year, Ning Cheng wouldn't give her a chance to return to Cloud Realm Trade Consortium. Ning Cheng and Ning had no idea that the youngest daughter of the Ning clan, the shrewdest head of Cloud Realm Trade Consortium, was currently suffering torment. Tang Li had said he'd give her 1 night, but he'd actually given her 2 days and 2 nights. Over the past 2 days, he'd given her nothing but water. Ning Jing was hanging from the ceiling and couldn't even sit down. Fortunately, she could reach a table and sit on it for the past 2 days. If not for that, she wouldn't have lasted half a day. She didn't make a fuss, but was incomparably calm. When she was serious, she looked like a fierce woman who wasn't cute at all. She didn't know what Tang Li had been doing over the past 2 days, but he'd actually forgotten about her. Trapped here, she had no idea what was going on outside. Could it be that Ning Cheng's whereabouts had been exposed? Long Fei Yi and Tang Li were both chasing after Ning Cheng, so they'd forgotten about her here? Thinking up to here, Ning Jing couldn't help but knit her brows in anxiety. But she quickly recovered her composure. There were many things she couldn't control, so she might as well let them happen. Right now, she could only control herself and let herself die peacefully here. It was good that Tang Li had left her here. She had no idea that Long Fei Yi had left long ago. Over the past 2 days, Tang Li had been tasked with searching and arresting people in Medical City. Tang Li hadn't gone anywhere, but sat by the door in a daze. For the past 2 days and 2 nights, she had drunk water, but he hadn't drunk a single drop. His haggard and sorrowful appearance made him no longer look like a banished immortal. Instead, he looked like an infatuated person who was about to turn into ashes. Suddenly, Tang Li stood up and angrily pushed the door open. Ning Jing was startled, but she didn't show it. It wasn't until she saw the most familiar figure at the door that her heart began to beat faster. I've been busy for 2 days and didn't have time to take care of you. You're lucky. Tang Li didn't approach her, but stood at the door. Shouldn't you give me an answer? Ning Jing just looked at him without saying anything. This forced Tang Li to draw closer until he was right in front of her. Answer me. Kill me or cut me up, do whatever you want, Ning Jing said coldly. Guards! Tang Li didn't hesitate anymore, and the guards immediately rushed in. Tang Li personally took the iron chain hanging from the roof beam and handed it to the guards. Drop it at the South City gate. Don't let her torture you slowly. Ning Jing didn't react at all, and just walked to the door with the guards. Jing, you don't have to be afraid. Your good brother will definitely come and save you. Tang Li sneered. Only God knew if he was comforting himself or testing Ning Jing. Finally, Ning Jing stopped. Tang Li, if you spare me, I'll tell you another piece of news. How about it? What news? Tang Li asked almost without thinking, and at the same time, he waved the guards away. A piece of news that's very beneficial to the Tang sect. It's not inferior to Han Yunshi's whereabouts. Ning Jing was like a businessman negotiating with a professional smile. Spare you? To what extent? Tang Li asked in return. He definitely wouldn't let Ning Jing go. Give me a good death. Ning Jing was very direct. In an instant, Tang Li's eyes were like the sky before a storm, so gloomy that it was frightening. Unfortunately, Ning Jing was standing at the door and didn't see it. Just like when Tang Li was standing at the door and didn't see her in the room, he had a pleasantly surprised expression. Okay, tell me. Tang Li still agreed. Ning Chung still doesn't know about your relationship with Long Fei Yi. I'm the only one who knows about this, Ning Jing said seriously. Tang Li was shocked, but he soon questioned. Who are you trying to fool? I led you to the apricot forest just to test you. Sure enough, you took Long Fei Yi there. At this moment, Ning Jing was as calm as her name suggested. She had always been suspicious. Since Tang Li helped Han Yunshi at the Apricot Forest Conference, she had been suspicious. The Cold War later was just a pretense. Even though she had seen Ning Chung several times, she never told Ning Chung about these abnormalities. She needed to give herself a definite answer. Therefore, after Ning Chung left, she deliberately lured Tang Li to the Apricot Forest. She hoped so much that it was only Tang Li who followed her. Unfortunately, it was Long Fei Yi who showed up. Without a doubt, Tang Li was the one who took Long Fei Yi there. You tested me. Ning Chung doesn't know about my relationship with Long Fei Yi. Tang Li muttered to himself. Suddenly he understood. That's why Ning Chung left Medical City long ago. He doesn't know that you led us to the Apricot Forest. If Ning Chung was still in the medical academy, he would definitely be secretly keeping an eye on Ning Jing's movements. Ning Jing didn't have a chance to tell Ning Chung about his relationship with Long Fei Yi. Ning Jing smiled. She never thought that Tang Li was so smart. Tang Li, I've told you 2 secrets. Just kill me with a knife. Tang Li gave a start, but quickly rushed out the door. Su Donglin, remove all defenses and tell your master that Han Yunshi is in Tianing. After rushing out, Tang Li didn't return to the room. He ordered people to untie Ning Jing and put her under house arrest. He wouldn't kill her, but he wouldn't see her either. Long Fei Yi received Tang Li's news and was preparing to deploy a rescue plan when he received Bailey Yuanlong's secret missive mentioning Gu Beiwei. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.